Welcome to CandleLight Audiobook. Chapter 261. I didn't mean to sit on your lap, but you're so unscrupulous. Who was it that seduced me, and who made me do something unscrupulous? Unlike Celine, who laughed happily, Asher was not laughing at all. Do you hate being unscrupulous? Asher asked, brushing her hair, which was a little distracted. The touch, unlike the usual, really contained self-interest, as Celine had said. So Celine's smile changed its meaning, too, and it had long since her playful giggles had disappeared, and she had turned into a face that was suitable for a woman who had been an adult today. Well, I don't know yet how unscrupulous you are, so I can't make a judgment. So was the way she spoke. Her tone was so secretive and stealthy enough to justify her lover's unscrupulous behavior, and as soon as Celine's answer was over, his hand, which had been brushing her hair, turned to her cheek. The soft cheeks were cold from the winter wind, and when he felt sorry about that, he swept down several times. They began to flush as if they had not been cold. Your cheeks are hot. I guess I'm drunk. It was not a drunk face even if anyone saw it, but Celine answered so, and Asher did not suspect it, for it was not important whether she was drunk or not. I heard that if we shared pain, it would be half. Is it the same with what you're drunk with? Celine asked, putting her hand on Asher's hand as it brushed her cheek. It was a question that was foolish, but more important and seductive to him than anything else. Well, will you try it? She didn't have to ask how, because his fingers, which had been brushing her cheeks, softly touched her lips. Celine closed her eyes slowly, without answering at his dense touch. Asher was no longer tolerable and bowed his head. No one thought that such a secret act would be seen in the garden under the terrace. It was not like that he hadn't seen her in a long time. The movement of the overlapped lips was filled with nostalgia because she had been far away. There was also a plea and a desire not to go anywhere again. And as he hugged her tightly and kissed her deeply as if he would not let her go, she also wrapped her hands around his neck and hung on to it, saying she would do the same. Their kisses continued until the people beyond the terrace could not overcome their curiosity and rushed out into the garden. Because he moved from the Empire to Croa at once, Asher did not get up all day just like when Celine used the hourglass. Unlike Celine, who had never got up by external stimuli, he opened his eyes and woke up when she shook him violently as a stroke of good luck in the midst of misfortune. However, he was not in a state of normal life, so he had to excuse that he was stuck in a room as he was doing something he hadn't done yet. Don't be so reckless again. Celine gave the cold water to Asher, who had spent the whole day in bed, and said. She felt uncomfortable to think that it was only because of her birthday, not because of any other important matter. Asher answered casually, I won't do anything for you to worry about. He did not accept Celine's advice, but it was vague in his reply that he might do it again. I can't believe you said such an answer with this poor appearance. Celine furrowed her forehead. You're too rash. What if the crown prince, who is no one else, does such a reckless thing? He could open his eyes if she woke him differently, but if he was threatened by a sudden threat, he might have lost his life. As she got angry with this, he held her hand, saying, Don't worry about that. I would not do such a reckless thing unless it's not related to you. How can you say that now? But when he smiled softly and said it was because of her, she couldn't get angry anymore. She said, adding to the small advice that he could no longer be obstinate because it was something she could not pass on. I get it. If Mr. Asher thinks so, but I can't help it. Instead, whenever something like this happens, I'll be locked up in my room and won't see you, so you take care of it. I'll never be as pleased as yesterday again. I'm not also offering water to you. After all, it was Asher who lost. It was because she declared that she would not meet him even if he used his ability to meet her. Moreover, if he insisted any more, it would cause her anger. You're not answering. Can I take that as a gesture of yes? And Asher gave a sigh and shook his head, as she seemed to be locking herself up in her room at any moment. I don't know if I can really keep it, but it is important to cheer up Celine now. Oh, my God, what have you done in one day so much that you have become so emaciated? As Asher appeared at the dining room for breakfast, Violet asked with a startled look. As she said, Asher looked very tired. Celine smiled softly and answered instead of Asher, His Highness the Crown Prince. I don't know in detail, but he would do a great job fit for his status. She had said that she would pass on about the use of his ability, but as if all her anger did not subside, it was a response that made him not say anything. And he nodded quietly and saved his words. It was better to refrain from saying unnecessary things. Are you going to return today? Yes, I'll be leaving right after the meal. I see. You're going to return right away. You've been visiting us for a long time, and I feel uncomfortable because of our poor hospitality. No, your hospitality has been good, and I've had a good time. There are some mistakes I have made in my sudden visit, so don't worry about it. I'm relieved to hear that. Violet's expression softened a little as if she really cared. Celine, when are you planning to go back? Were you not planning to leave yesterday morning? Celine answered Karen's question with a nod. Yes, I thought so, but I had an unexpected visitor. We don't have to go separately, but I'll leave after breakfast with him. The answer darkened Violet's face again. It was as if she had someone in front of her that she would never see again. Though there was a border and it was close, she could come and go as long as she liked. I see, are you ready? The carriage seems to be waiting. Yes, I don't have much luggage to carry, so I don't have anything to prepare for. Be careful and go back. I'll take the time and drop by soon. Yes, Mother. Karen, Chloe and the Marquis of Renard said goodbye to Celine carefully, as she really had little time to leave, except for Violet, who still looked dark. Even though it was predictable enough, she didn't utter a single word until the meal was over. She just ate very slowly and sadly in grief. And the condition continued until after the meal when Celine and Asher left the front door to leave for the Empire. The woman who had always talked to Celine by her side was nowhere to be found. Violet shut her mouth as if she had become speechless. I have to go now. Please stay healthy. Standing in front of the carriage with Asher, Celine gave a final farewell to the family of the Marquis. Violet's silence continued until then, so Celine held the hands of Violet, as she was annoyed, and said goodbye to her. Don't worry. We're not breaking up forever. Please visit the Empire with my mother. It's not as beautiful as the mansion of the Marquis family, but it's beautiful too. Lady Celine. And whether it touched Violet's tear glands that she had been holding back all the time, she suddenly burst into tears and took Celine's hands. Please stay healthy. Please feel free to contact me if anything happens. I'll be brave and visit the Empire soon. Violet, who said that with tears in her eyes, looked genuinely unwilling to let Celine go. There are so many things that I have not done yet for you. Her sorry and sad feelings passed through the hands of each other and were delivered to Celine as they were. Even her mother, Karen, looked so calm. It was also the first emotion Celine faced. Chapter 262. You can see me again if you want to. Why are you so sad? Celine wondered, but what preceded was sadness which was passed on from Violet. And Celine also felt sad to part with Violet. Violet was not a woman to be helpful. She couldn't even go out because she was concerned about her surroundings and could only drink tea and share a chat with her. Still, Celine felt sorry for Violet because she might have given her unconditional love. If fate hadn't been twisted and Karen and Chloe had not parted away, she would have grown up in a harmonious family and become a completely different person. She even had the needless thought, and she felt sad. Madam, don't worry. Since I'm around her, nothing will happen to Lady Celine. When Celine failed to answer, Asher, who was next to her, relieved Violet of her worries. Who could doubt the Crown Prince who said so? Thank you. Please take good care of Lady Celine. Celine, who ended her farewell only after Violet nodded her head, saying, I'll believe that, was able to get on the wagon with Asher. Without giving a moment's notice of what was so urgent, the carriage set off, and Celine stared vacantly through the window at the mansion of the Marquis, which was getting smaller and smaller. Lady Celine, use this. As soon as the mansion of the Marquis became a dot and it was no longer visible, Asher, sitting next to her, suddenly handed over his own handkerchief to Celine. Why this? Asher, who read the wonder in Celine's eyes, wiped her eyes and cheeks, instead of putting the handkerchief in her hand. "You're crying." "Me?" As she looked down at the handkerchief in surprise at the words of Asher, she could see that it was really a little wet. "When did I cry? Was it the last time I shed tears of blood at Lyra's shocking confession just before I was beheaded?" "No, I felt like I had shed tears of anger and resentment since then, but I have never shed tears because of such pure sadness. I must have got it from the Marquise. You know, it's like a yawn that passes on, sometimes. How long have I been together with her?" Celine, who was embarrassed by her tears, made excuses as it was not that she could not meet her forever. And Asher said yes, wiping her eyes which were red, affirming that it was right. "That's right. That happens sometimes. And in my experience, when you get such a feeling, it's better to accept it as it is, and not to try to let it pass. It gets angry when it stacks up." Then Asher put his handkerchief on Celine's lap and turned his head to the other side of Arya. He seemed to mean that she should not pretend that she wasn't, but feel sad to her heart's content. It was also because she did not express her weak feelings because of her personality. In gratitude for the consideration, Celine turned her head again to the window, with the handkerchief in her hand. Since their purpose was not a vacation or trip, they continued to travel in carriage except to stop by a village for a short rest. It was also because of Asher's expression, which sometimes kept him from thinking or hiding his nervousness. Celine, who had assumed that it was because of the pile of work by his unscheduled visit to Croa, shook her head firmly at Asher's suggestion to go slowly. Thanks to the occasional change of horses, it took only 4 days for the capital, but it would originally take a week even if they ran fast. "If it is this distance, I can go back with my ability, so I'll go first." "Yes?" Suddenly, Asher said that he would return first, using his powers. "How can you bring up such heartless, cold words?" Celine asked again if she had heard anything wrong, and he said again, holding a few packages of his own in his hand. "I'm sorry, but I left behind something very important to me. I'll go back by myself because the driver has a strange suspicion if we go back together." "Then you didn't need to come to me from the beginning. Moreover, it is absurd to say that you will go back alone even though we have only half a day to arrive." She was really dumbfounded, but his will was so firm that she closed her mouth, which had opened a little bit. "See you in the capital, Lady Celine. You look very busy going back, with only 1 or half a day left, and I wonder if you'll be able to see me." Asher did not reply with an unknown smile. And Celine was more upset by this, turned her eyes and gave him to leave now. "Go away right now. You said you are busy." "All right. See you tomorrow, Lady Celine. Please have a good night." Upon those words, Asher disappeared, and Celine, who covered the quilt to the end of her neck, closed her eyes nervously. "If we're going to meet tomorrow, I don't know why you're leaving alone." The next day, as always, Celine, who left for the capital early in the morning, picked up Annie and Jessica on behalf of Asher's vacancy. It was because it was more comfortable to ride than the carriage of the servants. There was no need to let the seats vacant. Annie and Jessica opened their eyes wide and wondered why Asher had disappeared with their destination just around the corner. Did he leave alone? Yes. Why the hell did he? He said that there's something busy going on. Annie asked Celine no more questions because her voice was so cold to even answer. Jessica also stared quietly out the window, noticing Celine, who seemed in a bad mood, thinking, "I'd rather ride a carriage with other servants." It was about the time when they ran half a day without a break to reach the capital. What is that?" Jessica, who had been staring out of the window all the time, raised her voice as if something was strange. "Why? Look over there." Jessica pointed to the wall surrounding the outskirts of the capital. And Annie, who turned her eyes to Jessica's gesture, responded the same way. "Oh, my God. What is that? Flowers? Are they flowers? Why are those flowers there?" Celine also opened the window and pulled out her head to check the walls, and opened her eyes wide and couldn't hide her surprise. It was because the entire wall scene in the carriage was decorated with tulips. Those are tulips. How can I not be surprised? The walls that should defend the capital were full of beautiful tulips. It was the same for those who stood in a long line at the gate to enter the capital, and they were all staring at the tulips, which were packed with walls until their eyes felt some pain. As she stared at the splendidly embroidered walls, Jessica asked Celine with a misty look. Is there any festival in the capital? That can't be. What would it be in winter? And no matter how great the festival is, I've never seen them mobilize so many flowers. Before Celine gave an answer, Annie said, That's ridiculous, and Jessica agreed, saying, That's right. So, why did the walls suddenly go like that? Well, I don't know. Miss, do you have any idea? At the question, Asher's face flashed across Celine's mind. The Crown Prince would be the only one who could prepare for such a great event by using tulips that were still fresh in winter. Celine rolled her eyes without answering, and Annie, quick-wittingly, opened her eyes wide and covered her mouth with her hand. She must have thought of Asher, too. Oh, my God. Don't tell me. So, did he go back to the capital first? Is he going to present this beautiful sight to Celine? No, he wouldn't have prepared for such an event to show off tulips all of a sudden. He must have prepared something for a greater purpose. Annie thought, rolling her head fast and screaming a little as if she had reached the greatest possibility. What's wrong, Annie? Jessica, who still hadn't figured out the situation, asked Annie, and Annie accused her of being not wary of the given scenario. Why are you so unwary of? Why? Oh, who can get so many tulips this winter, and who does he think he'll show it up to? With those words, Jessica rolled her eyes and opened her eyes wide as if she thought of a person. In the meantime, the carriage sped past the gate. It didn't take time to identify otherwise because it was a carriage of Celine, and was not anyone else's. Chapter 263. Welcome back, Lady Renard. As she entered the capital, dozens of knights politely greeted Celine. They were dressed in a white uniform that they wore only during official ceremonies, even though they were royal knights. It seemed that they had been waiting for a long time, and there were also many spectators wandering around pretending not to be. The walls must have been the beginning. In addition, as if the tulips surrounding the walls were only the beginning, tulips were everywhere in contact with the eyes, except for pathways and roads for carriages. While Celine was unable to speak in alarm on the path of the tulips, knights surrounded Celine's carriage as if they were escorting her. His Highness is waiting. A knight's voice was heard through the open window. Only then did Celine came to her senses and nodded. Then the knights and carriage began to move slowly to their destination. Didn't you say he returned last night? How on earth did he prepare all this in one night? The entire capital, as well as the walls, was so splendid that it was almost impossible to decorate it within a night. It took at least a week to gather a lot of people's help. I'm sure His Highness has prepared it a long time ago. Just in time for your return. Annie answered as if it was natural. It had been Celine's idea to return home on her birthday, and it was a natural and right guess. Wasn't it Asher who had promised to use all the empire to propose splendidly? It was not the whole empire, but he was keeping the promise he had made to Celine using the whole capital. Oh, my God. Then is it that flower? The flower Our Lady has received before. Aha. The flower that won't wither. How romantic he is. That's right. I hope Baron Bourbon will see and learn. While Jessica and Annie were beside her and admired each other, Celine was moved by the flowered path Asher had made and said nothing. The scene that she had criticized him just last night was nowhere to be seen. She realized that he had gone back to check and prepare for this, and she couldn't have any more of that feeling. The carriage passed the entrance to the capital and over the square to the imperial castle. She couldn't take her eyes off because there were beautiful places in every corner of her eye. Moreover, no one cared about the flowers, as Annie said, as if they had been decorated for a long time ago. Instead, Celine's carriage, escorted by the royal knights, drew more attention. Every passerby stared at Celine's carriage with a face full of joy. Some expected that at last there arrived something to come. Oh, my God, how beautiful she is. She is such a sweet, clever woman, and His Highness is proposing something great like this, right? Yes. She's not the usual noble lady. She's a lady who can be called the power of the empire. His Highness has cleaned up the deep-rooted evil forces, and he even got the wise and beautiful crown princess, so the empire must be safe now. They praised Celine and rejoiced with one heart. There was hope that the empire would be a little better. They also expected that Celine, born of humble origin and reached the top of her career, would do something for them. The knights and carriage marched slowly through the capital as if to show Celine the sincerity of Asher. All the people of the empire stopped what they were doing and followed them behind. They followed, imagining what the crown prince, who was waiting for Celine, would look like because he was the first to hold such a grand and spectacular event. As she arrived at the imperial castle, there were more people waiting than the spectators Celine had brought. Rather than following the horse-drawn carriage, they seemed to be planning to take a good seat in the imperial castle and watch the crown prince's proposal. Although so many people gathered, the door, which had always been tightly closed, was wide open, and the knights, who controlled and confirmed the visitor with their stern faces, bowed deeply without asking anything, welcoming Celine's arrival. "Welcome back, Lady Renard. Please go in." With that permission, the carriage entered the castle without delay. There was no interruption or trace of anyone on the way of the carriage, as if emptying all of the huge gardens of the castle for today. Even the birds, who were always singing at the top of their voices, quietly watched this scene. The place where the carriage stopped after a long journey was in front of a huge fountain located in the middle of the garden. There was Asher waiting for her, dressed in colorful clothes that she had never seen before, as if he had been tailored for today. "We're here." A knight, who was escorting the carriage, opened the door, and Celine, with her cheeks blushing, carefully got out of the carriage. Her heart was pounding as she stepped forward. During that time, dozens of knights guarding the carriage lined up beside either side of the road and raised a sword marked by splendid workmanship. It was a beautiful scene that could only be seen at the royal official ceremony. Of course, that was not the only thing. As soon as Celine was about to step toward Asher on the other side, he suddenly lowered his position and fell on one knee. Jessica and Annie went out of the carriage. They covered their mouths and twisted their whole body as if they wanted to scream. The same was true of the onlookers who were watching. They wanted to scream and respond to the crown prince's romantic appearance right away, but they tried hard not to break the mood and shook their fists. "If you cross this road, you will never return again." When Celine, who had paused for a moment in surprise, tried to walk again, Asher, who broke the stillness, opened his mouth quietly and slowly. It was a warning and a piece of advice, and lastly, a declaration. It also meant that she should think carefully because he was giving her a last chance. Nevertheless, he had no doubt that Celine would come to him without delay. It seemed that if she changed her mind after all and tried to leave him, he would mention the past and hold her. It was a way to blame her on why she would abandon him after she had made a promise. When Celine noticed this, a deep smile came to her face. "You can't go back," that was what she wanted to say. There was no regret or hesitation in her steps. It was totally different from the appearance she had when she got off the wagon. It seemed as if it was Asher to wait for the proposal, and Celine was going for it. As a result, Asher smiled a little, saying, "It is really like her, let alone displeased. Are you sure you will not regret this?" Then Celine, who arrived in front of Asher, reached out her hand and asked. She asked as if she would give Asher a last chance. And he took her hand and kissed her on the back of her hand. He answered without hesitation, "That's a question I don't even have to think about. You have to keep it. If Mr. Asher would betray me, I would be willing to turn back the hourglass." She didn't know if it would be possible, but she was willing to do so, even if she had to break the hourglass and bring it back to the distant past. Because of Celine's frightful threat, he replied as if he also could not be defeated, "Please do so." "No, I hope you will. I'll follow you no matter how much you try to get away with the hourglass. Unlike Lady Celine, I can use my powers over and over again. No matter how much time you turn back, you will never get away." Celine smiled contentedly at the reply, which was dotted with that terrible obsession. What a better future could be, not being able to escape from Asher. When she looked as if he needed no more words, he took out the ring he had prepared and said to Celine, "Will you marry me, if you don't mind?" The ring with the mysterious and beautiful jewelry that she had never seen anywhere was shining in blue. It was like the eyes of Asher, proposing. As she had wished, he had really prepared a ring that resembled his eyes. Those watching the two from afar swallowed their saliva, at the moment they had expected. Celine closed her eyes for a moment and took a breath, receiving the gaze of those who hid in the imperial castle and watched it. Chapter 264. She had thought she would get the ring right away, saying yes if he proposed to her, but she couldn't do it right away in the great joy she had never tasted. The eyes of Asher, which were always shining, came to her mind. And then slowly emerged in turn, with Sarah and Karen and other precious beings, her forces sending endless favors, and finally the entire capital city being decorated with tulips. Unlike in the past when there had been nothing, there were so many precious things that made her heart warm just by thinking. Even when she closed her eyes, the touching and beautiful scene was vividly spread and she seemed to pour tears into it. Now that she had no more ugly feelings, appearances, people, she faced the future she had never drawn even in the dream, opened her eyes slowly and hugged him with her arms, who knelt on one leg, with her face as if she were about to cry. Of course. Before Celine could finish her answer, Asher hugged her in his arms. Thanks to that, the ring he was holding rolled onto the ground, but no one cared. After her birthday, Celine became an adult and naturally lived in a busy whirl of business. It was because she couldn't move only for her own benefit, as she had done in the past. Now she had to manage her own forces that had become pillars of the empire while filling the vacancy of the aristocratic party, and also to manage the mansion and property because her mother, Karen, had left the empire and she had taken over them. In addition, she had a close relationship with the academy, so she had to be briefed on the students' achievements from time to time and to identify the best in the class and invest in funds or provide a better environment. This alone would lead to a busy day, but she had something more important than all of them combined. It was the preparation for a national wedding. Thanks to Asher, who had made a big proposal on a large scale by laying flowers across the capital as if to show off to everyone, Celine and Asher's national marriage was receiving great attention from people of other countries beyond those of the empire. Therefore, she was even busier because she had to prepare for a national wedding that everyone envied and admired without making a mistake. Of course, the preparation of the ceremony was taken care of by the imperial castle, but it also required a lot of Celine's efforts, such as choosing a dress or studying the order of the ceremony and etiquette. "Miss, the dresses we ordered have arrived." Annie knocked on the door, making a great fuss, and Celine, who was writing a letter to a newly invested businessman, went out of the room, arranging it. Right in front of the door was Annie, with her eyes glistening and flushed. Celine smiled briefly and asked Annie, because she was more excited than herself, even though they were not her dresses which had arrived. "Where are they?" "They are in the lobby. I think they have brought almost 100 dresses. More than 20 servants followed them. I caught a glimpse of them as they moved them, but my eyes were so dazzled that I was speechless." 100? The designs I chose and described was almost 20. I thought they are going to bring some extra dresses other than the designs I ordered, but I didn't think they'd bring 100 dresses. So Celine just shut up. Of course, what kind of complaints can I make, as they brought more dresses? On the contrary, I could choose the dress that would suit me best and brighten me up first among the countless dresses. I can't wait for you to try it on. How beautiful would you be? I'm sure it's beautiful enough to go down in the history of the empire. You are dazzling enough, even when you're dressed in a dressing gown like this. Annie spoke to herself in ecstasy, as if imagining Celine in a colorful, elegant dress. She added the natural words that men from all over the empire would fall in love with her. In the lobby where she arrived with such a tumultuous chat from Annie, nearly 100 dresses, as she said, were waiting for Celine's choice, showing off their beautiful selves. The designer, who was in a hurry to clean up the mess because the amount was so large, and the servants who accompanied her hurriedly took a courtesy when they found Celine. Celine could see the designer's troubled expression after she deeply bent her head. She seemed nervous because it was Celine who would soon become the crown princess. We are sorry, we are not ready. Jessica, who led the visitors to the lobby, spoke to Celine casually, speaking on behalf of them. Miss, you came down early. I think it takes time to clean up more than 100 dresses. Would you like to wait while you have tea? It was also because, unlike ordinary aristocrats, she knew that Celine would not be angry about such a trifle. Busy Arya did not do anything stupid to waste her feelings on unproductive things. Celine answered Jessica's question with a shake of her head. No, you don't have to clean up in detail. Anyway, they have to take them back. So, I think I should try on the dress while I'm waiting for tea. Besides, they've prepared 100 pairs of them, so it might take me a whole day to look at the design. Her voice was so soft that the servants, who had been bowing their heads to the full extent, lifted their eyes to check Celine's expression, and as she had such a gentle expression as her voice, they swallowed a sigh of relief. I don't know why they brought so many dresses. There's no reason to feel bad as there are many dresses I like, even though I've only looked through once. Then the designer was encouraged and talked about the reason because Celine seemed to like them rather than upset. His Highness the Crown Prince ordered it. He asked me to create as many dresses as I can so that Lady Renard can be satisfied. Did Mr. Asher do that? Celine asked back with a wide-open eye. You must be spending your busy days as much as I am, but you've paid attention to such trivial matters. Moreover, dresses and accessories were not part of Asher's involvement. It was not something that he should not be involved in, but it was usually a part of women's affairs. Moreover, few men were interested in women's clothing because it was usually a part of women's care, and it was a trivial thing. Yes. His Highness also told me to prepare dresses that would suit the beauty of Lady Renard. You don't even want to give me a chance to regret something I haven't met you because I've been busy. Asher often left Celine speechless like this. You are so devoted to living far away, so how about living together? As if to imagine the imminent future, Celine's eyes began to tremble slightly. Ah, and there's a dress that His Highness designed himself. Designed himself? Yes. Would you like to take a look? The designer, who said that, told the servants to bring the dress that was foremost in front of them. Of course, she was full of confidence as if she was sure that Celine would see it. Who can just pass on a dress that her lover prepared himself? As Celine nodded slowly, the designer had a good complexion. His Highness ordered a white dress that is proper and regular. He said he'd dress in a formal white one and it would be matched like a tailored one. Instead, he said that because Lady Renard is excellent in appearance, I must prepare the splendid decoration suit for it. Then the designer instructed the maidservants who had brought the dress to spread it out to Celine so that it would be seen well. As she explained, it was a dress of pure white color, but it could only be described as the ultimate in harmony with mysterious pearls that glowed in 5 colors, brilliantly reflective diamonds, and pieces of lace that must have been touched by craftsmen. Who would dare wear such a colorful dress for her only wedding? It was clear that the main character would be transformed into a dress, not a bride. It was a colorful dress that no woman would dare to digest. But Celine wasn't. Would you like to try it on? Okay. Chapter 265. As soon as Celine's answer was finished, the waiting servants, with deft touches, helped her change her clothes. The elegant yet simple interior suit had been transformed into a colorful dress with Asher's utmost sincerity, and the dress that no one seemed to be able to digest became part of Celine and made her look stand out. Oh, my God, miss. You are so beautiful. It made Annie's constant babbling stop and she stuttered. Annie wasn't the only one who thought so. Everyone who saw Celine in her dress could not speak in admiration, even the designer who was worried as she had made the dress that Celine's appearance might be buried in it. I don't have to try on another dress. There is no need to fix it. As I like it, I'll do with this dress. As she really liked it, Celine raised up the corners of her mouth to the fullest and said, checking herself in the mirror. She might remember receiving a similarly colorful dress as a gift in the past and said that she might know Asher's taste, occasionally smiling. There were still 100 dresses left, which they had made day and night, but no one was disappointed by Celine's statement that she would not check them. It was then that everyone accepted that it was a very natural result. Ah, but wait a minute to clean up. There are still some people left to choose dresses. Yes? Celine, who uttered the unexpected words, looked at Jessica and Annie with a smile on her face. They were like the main characters of the words she just brought up. You are my precious maids who've done your best for me, and of course I should give you this much. Miss. As Celine had found her mate, they had also found theirs, so it must be a short time left before they could be congratulated by all. So when Celine said she would give them a present for the occasion, the designer was very embarrassed and stammered and dared to argue back. But Lady Renard. This dress is specially made for the royal family or for the one who will join the royal family, and it is a little too much for a commoner. However, in Celine's chilly eyes that soon returned, the designer was forced to keep her mouth shut, unable to speak until the end. Don't worry too much. I'll let them have a big wedding fit for this beautiful dress, so please refrain from saying anything unnecessary. Celine, too, had half the blood of the common people, and she spent her childhood in a vague origin of commoners. Even she was a daughter of a prostitute, they could find fault with anything if they tried. The designer did not refute the idea anymore if she recalled this. Even so, she could not hide her disgruntled expression perfectly, if she didn't like this situation. Sensing this, Jessica, feeling anxious, hurriedly waved and tried to say she was fine, but Annie, who was in ecstasy, drew attention with a small shriek earlier than that. Are you serious? Can I choose a dress that I really like? Well, isn't it a dress made for someone to wear? Oh, my God, oh, my God. I can't believe I could wear such an elegant and beautiful dress. As soon as Celine's permission was given, the excited Annie began to wander among the dresses and find the most beautiful dress that would suit her. Like the designer, the servants who were proud of their work disapproved of it, but they quietly waited on Annie without expressing it otherwise. Jessica, what are you doing? Why are you not choosing a dress? Miss. In the meantime, Celine approached Jessica, who was hesitating and was wary of others. She pushed her on her back and urged her to pick a dress. But, it's too much for me. And I feel like I'm going to be troublesome for you. Celine pointed out Jessica's foolishness with a very significant smile, as she might expect the tearful answer. Jessica, I know what you're worried about, but, do I look so easy? Yes? Jessica looked up at Celine with a twinge in her eyes because it was a question that was completely incomprehensible. There's nothing for you to worry about. No, something worrisome will not happen. You know. I'm not a very good person in the first place, am I? After a long period of time, she had overcome villains who she thought she wouldn't dare fight against, and she had managed to get the people she liked, and she could not be wary of others who were low and insignificant like these. Miss. I hope you realize that it is more humiliating and insulting for me to not listen to me here and to be wary of them. Celine urged Jessica again. It was an elegant and gentle expression like the first time, but its meaning was very significant. No matter how famous and great the designer was in the empire, nothing could be more disgraceful than that if it happened to defy the instructions of the soon-to-be crown princess. When Jessica realized this, she bit her lip and moved slowly toward the dress as if she had no choice. This was because she knew that this kind of action from Celine would bring bad results, but she had no other choice. Eventually, Celine presented Jessica and Annie with 2 dresses each, and she also picked a few more extra dresses for herself. I will charge them to the imperial castle. Celine shook her head when the designer said so, because it was a considerable sum for an individual to pay, although she was a noble. No, I'll pay. There is a share for Jessica and Annie, so you can't charge them to the imperial castle. At her beckoning, Celine's maid, who was waiting beside her, took out gold coins and paid for them. There was no hesitation because it was Celine who had accumulated a large wealth beyond the financial power of the Rosent family, which were once known as the richest in the empire. The designer, who had an impure look at cash payments, not a check, recognized who she was and changed her face. She showed courtesy and left the mansion. The designer experienced the unexpected event that hurt her pride as just maids wore the dresses she had made with all her heart. However, it was nothing to Celine. Celine was a woman who had built up her force and gained great wealth since she had been regarded as a villain and would soon become the crown princess. Even she had a strong foreign force existing in other countries. Unlike in the past, when she had been ignored for nothing she had but her appearance, she didn't have any enemy anymore, so the designer didn't have to be hated by Celine. After everyone left, Annie, who had an unexpected gift, circled the lobby, wondering if she was dreaming. I can't believe I got this fancy dress. No matter how much Baron Bourbon succeeded in his business, he wouldn't be able to give me such a great dress. That's right. I don't know where to wear it. Unlike Annie, who was just excited, Jessica was somewhat uneasy and unsettled. Annie criticized Jessica as if she had lost her excitement with this. It's a gift for us after a long time. Why do you have such a terrible face? You can wear it at the wedding of Our Lady, so what are you so worried about? There will be your wedding, too. But I'm just a maid. These dresses are only for a few nobles to wear. I'm sure I'll be laughed at by someone. What? Were you worried about that? Annie laughed loudly at Jessica, saying she was worried about nothing and asked. And? Did you say that you are just a maid? Do you think all the maids are the same? Don't you know whose maid we are? Annie showed her dumbfounded expression about how foolish Jessica was. We are maids of Lady Celine, who is the star of the empire and will be the crown princess. We are even maids of the crown princess. Even the nobles dream of it, right? That's right, but... It was not easy to work near a noble, but she was even a maid of the crown princess. It was so foolish of Jessica to demean herself and show an uneasy attitude even though she had taken on a position that ordinary citizens could not dare dream of. Chapter 266. Who's worried about who now? Even if what you're worried about is happening, do you think Our Lady will let it go? Does she look like that? Well, all right. If you want to worry and get hurt, do as you please. I'm going to get my share as I get a lot of favor from Our Lady. Annie, who left her words, left the room as if she no longer wanted to mix words with Jessica. Jessica, left in the lobby, sighed and controlled her complex emotions alone. Not long after that, people from the family of Marquis Renard arrived from Croix to attend the wedding. It was an urgent visit with only a few days left before the ceremony. Upon arriving in tears, Violet, who took Celine's hands, began to apologize, saying she was sorry for coming late. I'm sorry I'm late. Even though I was in a hurry. No, thank you for coming. Celine's answer was sincere. She hadn't thought it was very important for her family to attend, but when the time was about to run out, she had to worry about it. We were going to come early, but it took us more time to succeed to the title than I thought, said Karen, pointing to Chloe. Celine had heard it in a letter that Chloe had inherited the title of the Marquis. Now she had become perfectly the Marquise. Karen was truly elegant, beautiful and relaxed enough to suit her status. There was nowhere for her past sight to be seen, which she had to be always wary of the former Count and Curry below the knee. Though she wasn't worried about her mother, Karen seemed to be doing better than she thought, and the relieved Celine led Violet and Karen into her room, saying she had something to show them. What is it? You'll be surprised when you see it. It was so rare for Celine to behave this way that Karen had an interesting look on her face, not to mention Violet, who was happy even if Celine hadn't said anything about it. And then a little while later, in a fairly large box which Celine had a hard time bringing, Karen and Violet opened their eyes wide and asked Celine for an answer as if what this was. It's heavier than I thought. It's the dress I will wear for the wedding. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Violet could not speak with a very emotional look as if she had not expected to see it until the wedding day. Karen asked Arya, can I open the box? Of course. Please open it. As soon as Celine's permission was given, Karen quickly opened the lid of the box. The dress folded neatly in the box was a beautiful dress that was close to an art piece at a glance. How can such a dress be this pretty? Would you like me to wear it? When Celine asked so, Violet and Karen could not answer as if they asked she dared to do it. It was because it was a dress that was so precious for Celine to wear in the national marriage. What if it's ruined? It wasn't that easy to break, but it was natural to be bothered anyway. So they were worried about even sneaking it out like this, but Celine said she would even try it on. When the two failed to answer readily, Celine asked them to help her wear the dress as she took it out of the box. "Why didn't you answer? You don't want to see it? You didn't see the dress when I chose it, so you should see it now. I want you two to see it before anyone else." Originally, when choosing the dress, it was essential for female relatives to be present. But Celine remained alone in the empire apart from her family, so she had to do everything by herself. At the time, she had thought it was not a big deal, but when she faced Violet and Karen, she thought, somehow, she had to show them the dress before showing it to others. "Are you really not going to help me?" So when Celine asked again, Violet quickly approached her and began to help her put on the dress. "How can I refuse my lovely granddaughter's request to see it before others?" So was Karen. She helped Celine wear the dress, thinking that her daughter seemed to have changed so much from a few years ago. It took a lot of time because it was a very careful touch, but soon Celine was able to change into a beautiful, colorful dress. "You're the most beautiful bride I've ever seen. How can such a fancy dress go well with you? This beautiful girl is my grandchild." Violet, a tearful woman, said, wiping the corners of her eyes with a handkerchief, and Karen nodded as if she agreed. "You are a child I gave birth to, but you're a beauty that's really hard to find. The dress looks very good on you, too. I don't know who made it, but it's not enough to give a prize." At Karen's words, Celine mentioned who had made the dress as if she had waited. "Well, why don't you say a few words when you meet him at the wedding? I heard that it's a dress Mr. Asher instructed by himself." "Who?" "Mr. Asher. I guess he loves the colorful thing. He sent me this colorful dress before. That's why I couldn't try it." "Is this a dress ordered by the Crown Prince himself?" The look on their faces was as if they couldn't believe it, though they didn't ask again. How could the Crown Prince order a dress himself? It was even a fancy and delicate dress that suited Celine so well that they could clearly see how much effort he had put into it. Oh, my God. He is a guy who only thinks of his lover. Extending his hand to his lover's dress, he would have been seen as not a desirable masculine figure to be spoken of in public. Of course, it was the evaluation among men, but it was a totally different assessment among women. A woman would be proud if someone she loved would give her this much care. How can they not be glad that Celine in the distance is loved by her lover? Celine, who once again saw her beautiful figure through the mirror, smiled and said to Violet and Karen, "I can only show you this because only the dress arrives here. They are making jewelry fit for my dress. They said it would be here in a few days, so I hope you'll watch it with me then." "Yes, of course. It's an honor for me to choose jewelry with Lady Celine." Very naturally Violet answered yes, and Karen also gave a look of affirmation, though she did not answer otherwise. It seemed as if the conversation was coming to an end so warmly, but Celine, who looked displeased with Violet's answer, said, staring at Violet as if she had realized the reason right away, "Mrs. Violet. Why don't you stop calling me lady?" "Pardon me?" Violet was quite embarrassed by the sudden question, and Celine, finding out that she did not understand her question, opened her mouth again. "When someone calls me, it's right to call me lady, but Mrs. Violet is my grandmother, right? It's weird even if I think about it for so many times." Only then Violet, who understood Celine's intentions, blinked her eyelids quickly. Unlike in the past when she had been nervous as if she were walking on glass that was about to break right away, Celine cared about and questioned even a trifle thing, and Karen watched Celine with a smile from a distance. "Just like my mother who doesn't call me lady, I think it's strange that my grandmother calls me lady. Of course, it's my first time having a grandmother, so I don't know exactly. Maybe it's natural and normal for you to call me Celine just like my mother and father do, but I'm sorry if I'm wrong." In other words, Celine meant that Violet should call her comfortably and easily. But Violet was overwhelmed and was embarrassed since it was an unexpected request. And Karen, who was still watching it, added a word for Violet and for her daughter. "Yes, Celine, you're right. Usually, family members call each other unless they have something special to do. Unless they want to show that there is a wall between them as they are in a bad relationship. Well, we aren't in a bad relationship, so we don't need to call each other using our titles. Yes. Chapter 267. After the conversation, Karen and Celine looked at Violet. They came to the conclusion that there was no need to do so it meant that she should call her by name. However, Violet, who received the attention, was frozen in a nervous state, not knowing how to answer. There was a question on her face that she didn't know if she really should call her by name. If you really want to call me lady, I can't help it. As Celine tried to change her dress by speaking carelessly as if it were her last chance, Violet, who was startled, stammered by the end, calling her name. Celine. Yes, grandmother. And Celine also called her grandmother instead of Mrs. Violet. It was an unbecoming title for Violet, who looked pretty and young for her age, but Violet began to cry as if she liked it very much. If she left her alone, she would cry out, so Karen broke in between the two as soon as possible and changed the subject. Now that you're done with the title, why don't you take a look at the mansion? This is the most beautiful house, not to be compared in the empire. I had put much effort and money to decorate it, and it was a pretty good place to leave it like this. You'd better do that, Grandma. The indoor garden my mother carefully decorated is also quite worth seeing. However, despite changing the subject, Celine failed to stop her tears by calling Violet grandmother again. Still, Violet replied with a very bright and sweet smile, so Karen and Celine responded with a gentle smile. The ornaments tailored to the dress did not arrive, even though there were only a few days left for the national marriage. It was because of the late completion of the dress due to the excessive demands of Asher. If he had set the sufficient days to the national marriage in the first place, it would not have been so tight, but the minimum date to the national marriage had been set due to the strong demand and insistence of Asher that the royal family should receive the crown princess as soon as possible and find stability. In the meantime, Celine put off all her schedules and had a good time with her family, who had visited the empire in a long time. She didn't do anything special. She was just taking a walk, drinking tea, and having dinner together, as much as she had been in the mansion of the Marquis of Renard. Nevertheless, it was about time that she felt sorry that this simple joy would come to an end soon. Miss. You have a visitor. They're from the jewelry store. Annie came running up and announced the visitor in a voice of exhilaration. The jewelry store? Yes. They brought along several large boxes. Really? Are the ornaments finished? Celine, who had been worried that the ceremony should be held without jewelry because it was such a short schedule, hurried a little bit, feeling it was fortunate. I was worried about the time, but I'm glad they have arrived. I led them to the lobby. Karen said as if she might have come down first. Violet also appeared, following her. This was because she promised to drink tea while enjoying flowers in the garden in the midst of spring. Violet might have heard a visit from the jewelry store, and she urged Celine to go to check with a twinkle in her eyes. How many large boxes did you bring? It's going to be fun choosing. Should I choose the ornaments, wearing the dress? I love you would do that, but I'm afraid it's going to be broken. It was a very delicate dress. When Celine asked if she would choose the ornaments, wearing her dress, Violet replied with a very worried tone. Nevertheless, her expression was so bright that she looked really strange. And Karen agreed with Celine. It's a pure white dress, so you don't have to wear it. White will match any color. That's true. Though it was a short distance, Celine, Violet, and Karen talked about what ornaments would suit her best, while they moved to the lobby. Then they soon came to the conclusion that Celine would be able to digest anything elegantly and beautifully, and it was a very fast conclusion. Please come in, he's waiting inside. When they reached the lobby, a man who seemed to be a servant from the jewelry store bowed deeply and greeted the three. Though it was a bit strange to say that his dress and speech tone was from the jewelry store, the three were distracted by the ornaments they were about to meet soon, entered the parlor with great excitement, not feeling strange about them. Lady Celine. And the unexpected figure in the lobby made Celine stiff as a stone. Why is your highness here? So on behalf of Celine, Karen asked why Asher had visited the mansion. I came to see you. Oh, my God. You have a short temper even though the wedding is just around the corner, and you should see the bride dressed up on the day. When Violet smiled softly and gave a rather complaint, because his answer was so impassive, Asher made an excuse. Among the ornaments, there are some which were made by my instruction, and I've come to check on them, so please don't be so angry. The time was urgent, and I couldn't help it. Did you instruct the ornaments after the dress? What if there was a rumor? That's what I wanted. I hope no one doesn't dare to look at you because of the rumor. As he answered with a certain impudence as if he would make a rumor, Violet laughed in the end. The laughter included a relief to confirm that Asher was a good person to really care for Celine. It was the same for Karen, and she smiled softly and urged him to check the ornaments. It'll take a while to check all these ornaments, and I think it'll be done until the day of the ceremony. Well, you're right. There are so many of them. While Karen and Violet were hurrying to check the ornaments, Celine, who had been watching quietly until then, approached Asher and asked him in a very low voice how he had come here, leaving his job behind. You were busy, weren't you? I've done all the urgent work and came here. Does it mean that other people are handling the rest of his work that is not urgent? Celine, who had interpreted the hidden meaning of Asher's words, sighed inside, saying that many people were suffering because of her. Oh, look at this, Madame Marquise. Do you think this emerald would look good on Celine? That's true. The sapphire earrings tailored to the ring will look good matched. It wouldn't be too bad to wear a red diamond to attract people's eyes, would it? It would be good to be a point. It's not bad to dress up all in pure white, and I can't say what the best thing is, because all of them are going to look good for her. I agree. As if they were wearing it, Karen and Violet carefully checked each ornament, and Celine, who had watched it for a moment, said that there was no need for that. Why? Come and check on them, Celine. No, I have an ornament and I've already decided. Without looking? Violet and Karen stared at her and asked for more details. Celine answered, glancing at Asher once. I'm going to decide the ornament Mr. Asher instructed. Did you see it in advance? No, not really, but I thought the jewelry might be the right design for the dress he ordered himself. It didn't matter if it was a design that didn't fit the dress, but there is a further significance that Asher had prepared himself even though he had been busy. Besides, it was a wedding that might be once in a lifetime, and she thought it would not be too bad to wear a dress and ornaments decorated by her lover. Of course, all of these decisions were possible because she was confident that she would digest anything beautifully and elegantly. I thought His Highness is the only one, but Celine, you also. A stupid donkey. Karen didn't mention it, but everyone in the lobby could expect the omitted words. How are they madly in love with each other? He hadn't been afraid to show her off as if he hadn't been shy, and Celine hadn't also expressed her feelings, but she had seemed to enjoy it. This was the case when Asher had been riding in the most splendid carriage in the Empire to advertise meeting Celine in the first place, and he hadn't said anything, but he had been eager to talk about it all the way around the neighborhood. Chapter 268. Even now, it was as such, though they were spending days, being away from each other, and they could not even imagine what it would be like if they stayed together after the wedding ceremony. The only thing they knew for sure was that people around them would get pretty tired. I'm sure it must be very good for Lady Celine. Is it? I look forward to it, Mr. Asher. Whether she didn't remember Karen and Violet had carefully chosen the jewelry, she smiled brightly at Asher's words that they would fit in. Then the servants took out the ornaments Asher had prepared as if waiting for her reaction, and they were slightly different from the other boxes in shape and color. That's so beautiful. That's right, you should have shown us this first. I feel like we've done the unnecessary work. And the ornaments Asher had prepared were so bright and beautiful that Karen and Violet could not complain about it. Whether he had really wanted to turn Celine into a pure white bride, the jewelry was mostly based on white and transparent diamonds, but each detail was delicate enough to impress. I don't know if I can say this, but Your Highness the Crown Prince may be a designer as a side job. That's right. I'm sure you'll make it big all along. You're probably busy with bookings, and can I reserve one, too? I'm going to buy a new headdress. At the question of Karen, mixed with mischief and sincerity, Asher replied with a look of apology. Thank you for your kind words, but I don't want to make jewelry for women other than Lady Selene, so please understand my mind. I see. Ah, yes. They were Arya's mother and grandmother, and if he made an agreeable response, it would be very good, but he firmly refused it. Nevertheless, the reason they did not hate him was that they felt that Asher was hanging on Selene as much. Mr. Asher. The child they loved and cared about met such a good man, but how could they hate him? Eventually, Violet and Karen, who had reached a positive conclusion, laughed a little at the sight of Selene, who was hitting Asher's arm with a little embarrassment. It was decided, but why don't you try it? Yes, Selene, I'd like to see you wearing these pretty ornaments. It would be good if my husband and Chloe would see it, but I don't know what makes them so busy that they go out every day. Violet sympathized with the two men, saying that they would be sad and regretful to hear that Selene had worn the ornaments, as they returned in the evening. I also want to see you wear it. As he watched, Asher was also pleased and affirmed. And Selene, too, decided to wear the jewelry and check it, so she nodded and walked toward the ornaments. However, Violet, who suddenly approached Asher, gave him a bright smile and said him to go out. I'm sorry, but your highness must leave now. What do you mean? When Asher asked, embarrassed, Violet answered, as if it was very natural. Isn't it the Empire's tradition not to see the bride until the day of the ceremony? I don't know the commoners, but I think the nobility is doing it. How sad it would be if your highness the crown prince of the Empire broke the tradition to fill his selfishness, as all of them kept it. I'm sure they'll be unhappy. You're not the only one who wants to see a pretty bride quickly. I remember you said you were here to confirm, and if you did, you should return. Violet spoke like a quick speaker, unlike her. There was such a tradition, but she could not know if everyone kept it, and not even Asher, who had been in the Empire all the time, didn't know it. No, he wasn't even interested in that. Perhaps not only Asher but also everyone was not interested. Nevertheless, why does she say I have to return? Is it because I firmly refused as I am not intended to make an ornament for a woman other than Selene? Is it an act of small revenge? Still, the shock was great. That's right, I think your highness should leave now. Asher wondered what to say, because he had not thought of it, and even Karen helped Violet to drive him to the edge. Lady Selene. Eventually, Asher gave Selene a look of salvation, and before she could answer, Karen answered. There's nothing as unscrupulous as showing piece by piece, and since there are not a few days left, I think it's better to show him a perfect dress, jewelry, hair, and makeup. When you do that, His Highness will be moved, and if you show him too much at a time, his mind will soon cool down. Karen, who added so little that Selene could only hear, waved her fan in a casual way. How can I not let Asher out when these two speak so feverishly? It was nothing but a little thing to see herself wearing jewelry. It was not that important. Violet and Karen wanted her to be on their side so much, so there was only one choice. It was a small request that Selene could do before she left the Marquis family of Renard before she had the wedding ceremony. I'm sorry, Mr. Asher, but you'll see it on that day because they say there's such a tradition. Asher looked sorry for her answer, but then he agreed and nodded as if he could not help it. It seemed that he would return like that, but... Oh, my God. Oh, my God. He kissed Selene briefly on the cheek as if he couldn't just go. I'll see you on the day of the wedding. Then he said goodbye to Violet and Karen politely, who had been surprised and covered their mouths, as if nothing had happened, and left the lobby. While remaining, Selene put her hand on the cheek and blushed. Violet and Karen smiled shyly like girls, and they were excited about the story of Asher, who had already gone. Who dares to imagine that His Highness the Crown Prince is such a man? Yes, I'm surprised to hear and see it from time to time. Time flew by as quickly as ever until the day of the wedding, with the regret of Asher. The wedding of Asher and Selene attended not only the nobles of the Empire but also foreign nobles and royals. It was very natural because it was the wedding of the Crown Prince who would be the next emperor, not the ordinary royal family away from the center of power. And Selene was the star of the Empire and the noble of Croa, and even all the nobles of Croa were present because she was known to be a lady of the Marquis family of Renard. They brought a vast amount of gifts to be seen good and Selene, and the servants of the imperial castle had to deal with them without a break. Of course, it had been expected because she had sent an invitation and received a reply, but they had sent too many gifts, so the servants stayed up all night trying to organize even days before the national wedding. I'm done with my share, and can I help you? Already? Hans. Your job speed is so fast. Then I'll ask for the next one. Yes. Hans was no exception who was working in the imperial castle. He should have been at the wedding with Jessica, but they couldn't let him rest as they were so busy. So he was absorbed in his work without showing off his mind, and Jessica had to wait on Celine by her side. Of course, serving at the wedding of the crown princess was a very glorious experience and it was an honorable place, but it was not as good as blessing her master with her lover. Celine, dressed by the maids from the imperial castle, was wondering about Jessica, who was in between them and being decorated, and asked, Jessica, isn't Hans still here? Yes. I heard Baron Bourbon would be arriving soon, but Hans isn't still here. Celine didn't seem to know that Hans was working in the imperial castle. She would never have imagined that Hans, who she had supported so much, would not be able to attend the wedding but organize the presents. Jessica? Celine asked Jessica carefully, with her eyes wide open, as if she reached an extreme imagination. Don't tell me, you didn't break up with him, did you? Oh, no. It can't be. How nice of him to me. Chapter 269. Really? Then, why are you doing this alone? Annie left for the imperial castle with Baron Bourbon, saying she was going to show off in the dress I gave her from the morning. Well, didn't you like it? No. I love it so much. It's not the reason. Then? If not, why? Celine asked, blinking her eyelashes which had become longer and richer with makeup. But Jessica did not answer, and one of the maids who had been aware of it said carefully on her behalf. Well, Your Highness the Crown Princess, if you don't mind, may I answer for her? With the full support of Celine, and with his excellent competence, he became a famous person, even though he was a commoner, and the maid of the imperial castle seemed to know his whereabouts. Do you know Hans? Yes. I'm really sorry to hear that, but I didn't dare ask for permission and opened my mouth first to do anything to help you. Celine stared into the eyes of the maid, who were really sorry for her answer because they looked like Annie, who was looking for a chance every time. The maid seemed to want to take this opportunity to impress Celine with this because she had heard that all her close maids had been well fed and had a good favor of Celine. Really? Jessica won't answer, so will you let me know? And Celine didn't hate such people, because it was easy to get the relationship as someone wanted to receive some price, rather than kindness without paying. As soon as Celine's permission was given, the maid's eyes shone and she answered with a quick, unscrupulous expression. Yes, I believe he works in the imperial castle, and I heard he's organizing gifts to be given to the national marriage. Is he organizing the gifts? Yes, I believe that too many gifts have been brought in and all the remaining personnel has been mobilized. Oh, my God. He's working now. She was surprised to hear that, as if she could not imagine that he was working until today, even though she had heard that he was so competent that he was asked for help here and there. What's your name? I'm Seg Ruby. Seg Ruby. She seems to be a lady of the Viscount family of Seg. Since she was the maid serving the crown prince in the imperial castle, it was no wonder that the noblewoman would fill the position. Ruby, who had so much desired attention from Celine, waited for her next words, with her eyes shining. Okay, Ruby, go tell Hans I'm looking for him. I see, Your Highness the Crown Princess. In addition, she got an order separately, and she went out of the mansion in a hurry with a happy face. What are you going to do, miss? Jessica, watching it, asked Celine, embarrassed and not knowing what to do, though she knew that if she called Hans, who was busy, to the mansion, there was only one thing left. Hurry up to be dressed up and get a makeup. Don't tell me you're going to attend my one-time wedding in a maid's uniform. There are so many maids to replace you. And Hans is an old acquaintance and I don't have a mind to retrieve my order, so if you don't want him to attend alone, get ready now. Even if you're going to be there like that, I won't stop you. It was half threatening, but the meaning was so sweet, and none of the people who heard Celine's words felt it. Miss. But if you go there in that uniform, the dress that I bought for you will probably be crying in your closet. The dress was made elaborately. How sad will the designer be? Poor thing. With Celine's encouragement to go on and get ready for the wedding, Jessica, who was at a loss and didn't know what to do, nodded slowly. Thank you, Mississippi. Stop thanking me, but just go and get ready. Then Jessica ran to her room. After Jessica disappeared, the maids who were helping Celine's dress up smiled inwardly and praised her good heart. A few moments later, Hans came to the mansion as he heard Celine was looking for him, but he looked serious, worried that something was wrong. Now that he could not dare to go inside and face Celine, he stood before the door and asked her, in a very urgent voice. I heard you found me. Yes, I did. You left Jessica alone. Yes? You have been working on a day like this. Do you need to organize the gifts so quickly? They're not going anywhere. They didn't run, but the amount was too much and they had to be dealt with urgently. That was what Hans had done. But as he seemed concerned that he was not able to attend the ceremony with Jessica, in the corner of his mind, his face became brightened as Celine blamed him. Then, the reason you called me. I'm sure she's ready by now, so take Jessica with you, and if you don't have a carriage, you can borrow it from the mansion, the prettiest carriage. When Hans was unable to speak to Celine's consideration and did not go away, Celine rebuked him again, asking him what he was doing without going. Jessie is my favorite maid, and I hope you will treat her without any shortage. As Hans's ability was outstanding and he was an acquaintance of the past, she cared for in many ways, but the bigger reason was that Hans was Jessica's lover. Celine hoped Hans would be successful and make Jessica happy. For Celine, his success was not a priority but Jessica's happiness. Therefore, it would be troublesome if he would just concentrate on his work and leave Jessica alone. Oh, I see. When she heard Hans walking away with his answer, Celine saw herself in the mirror with a sigh of relief. From the past to the present, the face that had fascinated countless people was truly beautiful. It was so beautiful that it was incomparable to anyone, but as it was carefully decorated for the ceremony, it was like a picture. I hope Asher likes it. Even if she hadn't dressed up, he had loved her as he had secretly reddened his ears, but as she decorated herself like this, she hoped he would openly express his mind in public once. How pretty in the world. There's no such thing as an angel from heaven. I gave birth to you, but the admiration comes out naturally. In the meantime, Karen and Violet came to Celine's room, after they finished their preparation. It was time to get ready to leave. The crown princess's tiara would be raised by the crown prince, during the ceremony, and only the jewel pins that would fix her hair were waiting for their turn. This was usually done by the bride's mother, and Karen tried to get the pins in her hand as if she had thought she deserved it, but then. I'm sorry, mother. I have someone else to put in the pins. Violet? Karen's eyes turned to Violet and Violet opened her eyes incredulously, but neither of them could not put the pins on her hair. Then who? Who on earth is putting pins in Celine's hair, beating Karen and Violet? As if the maids were also curious, they all held their breath and waited for Celine's answer. My dear friend. So, who is it? In exchange for an answer, Celine's long-awaited dear friend arrived at the mansion shortly after. She was known by the servants of the mansion, Karen, and by the maids of the imperial castle except Violet. Corinne. It was Corinne who had become the Marquise of Vincent. Celine. Oh, my God, how can you be so beautiful? You're so pretty that I don't even dare be jealous. She wanted to keep Celine's beauty somewhere in secret if she could. Karen was a bit despondent but laughed helplessly at the fact that Corinne was the one who would put the hairpins on her. She's my grandmother. You haven't seen her before, right? This is Corinne, my best friend, Marquise Vincent. I see. You are Celine's dear friend. Nice to meet you, I'm Celine's grandmother. It's an honor, ma'am. Corinne greeted Violet with an immaculate, respectful gesture. She was a prominent figure among the nobles. Violet smiled as softly as she did when she was dealing with Celine, whether she liked the noble and elegant Corinne very much. It was also thanks to that she was the most precious friend of Celine. "Corinne, I want you to fix my hairpin." "It's an honor, Celine." Celine had replaced the role of Corinne's wedding. Chapter 270. As if to recall the promise at that time, Corinne lifted the hairpin with a soft smile. It was pinning the already fixed hair into it, but it was too delicate and prudent to touch it for fear of making mistakes. "I'm done. Thank you." It was very simple and quickly over, comparing to the long waiting for their turn, but Celine and Corinne were able to confirm their friendship again. Celine, who had finished her final preparation, stood up and checked her dress one more time, and gave Corinne, Karen, and Violet a very long, soft look. After a long journey, a woman finally became an adult from a child, and it was the last goodbye to leave her family and move on to a new path. It was an inexplicable emotion not to be able to express with words. Nevertheless, it was also a warm feeling that everyone understood and wished for happiness. Before Celine, who had finished her preparations, left the mansion, she put her eyes briefly on the carriage that looked out of the hall window. The carriage sent to Celine for today was a colorful one decorated with tulips and jewels. The white body reflected the warm sun and glistened. The lights seemed to bless Celine's future. Now if she would put herself in the carriage and start, she would no longer return to Karen's mansion. All the important luggage had been sent to the imperial castle in advance, and the maids who were to be brought along today were also scheduled to enter with her. So there was no more reason to return to the mansion. "Miss. What are you talking about? Now she is the crown princess, not Our Lady. I can't believe you won't come back anymore. Miss. I hope you get along well in the imperial castle. I'm sure you'll be fine. Please don't forget us." The ownerless mansion must be a paradise on earth, but the servants of the mansion wept for Celine to leave for some reason. When Celine had first entered the mansion of the former count, they had cursed her so much, saying she was shallow and humble, but now they had already grieved for her absence with deep loyalty as if they hadn't done that. It was a quick turnaround in posture. In the past, not only these people but also the children on the streets had cursed Celine, but now that she was loved by everyone, it was ironic. "I've only changed my outward attitude." Her inside still thought about how to fill her own gains. For her purpose, she hadn't cared about the means and methods. Moreover, she had been a wicked woman who gave death to those who harmed her. But now that I think about it, not just myself but everyone did. Don't the servants feel good only to the masters who gave benefits to them? So there was no need to feel guilty about acting selfishly for her own benefit, for her happiness. Of course, it had been a long time since she didn't feel guilty or remorse, but she just thought of it all of a sudden. "See you at the castle." Just before leaving the mansion, Celine said so to her family. It was because the people of the Marquis family of Renard were to head to the imperial castle together in another carriage that would follow her carriage. Celine's carriage, accompanied by knights riding white horses back and forth, would slowly circle the capital before entering the imperial castle, where the wedding would take place, followed by the carriage of the Marquis family of Renard. And it was in order for Asher to greet Celine who would get off the carriage. It was the schedule for the future. "Yes." Violet's expression of the answer, in a very natural order, was faintly lonesome. Karen then took Violet's hand and consoled her. "Now we ride a carriage separately, but we can see her again when we go to the imperial castle. And since Celine said she would come to visit often, please wait happily." "Go ahead, Celine." "Yes, I will." She seemed not to want to spoil the mood because she was in a situation where only congratulations were not enough. Celine agreed and ended her last goodbye with great politeness and grace. Still, Violet could not erase her lonely face, so she turned her body to start before the gloomy mood continued, and the servants opened the front door of the mansion as if they had waited. It was time to get on the wagon. So, she was going to, but... Mr. Asher. Why is Asher standing in front of the entrance to the mansion as he should greet her in the imperial castle? Surprised, Celine stared vacantly at Asher for a moment, who was waiting for her. She looked at him, measuring Asher was a reality as he was seen in front of her. There was no wonder because Asher was dressed in a white suit, and she could not feel him real. "I'm here to pick you up, my lovely princess." Then Asher reached out to Celine. It seemed to mean that she should hold his hand. At this scene, the servants who had come to the hall to see Celine off, responded by blushing or covering their mouths with their hands, bringing to their eyes what they would never see again. How much he would like to see her, Karen spoke to herself quietly, unnoticed by anyone. The purpose of the visit was obvious because it was Asher, who had visited the mansion on the pretext of jewelry a few days ago. "Besides," he said, "my lovely princess." Although it was not wrong because the wedding ceremony was scheduled today, it was not yet done, so it could have been premature to call her that way. However, if she pointed this out, he would certainly make excuses for calling Celine princess for various reasons. And no one pointed out the excessive behavior of Asher, because it was so good to see him being a dull fellow to no one else but Celine. "Mr. Asher." Celine, whose face was blushing, called Asher's name. Even though she was called a shameful title in public, she did not seem to dislike it. No, she would rather express that joy, but she didn't know how to express it, so she seemed to have replaced it by calling his name. "Please hold my hand." At the urging of Asher, Celine slowly took his hand. Unlike his nonchalant attitude and way of speaking, he had a strong grip on his hand. Nevertheless, he did not show anything outwardly and walked out of the mansion with Celine and got into the carriage. It seemed that they had decorated elaborately not only on the outside but also on the inside as the crown princess would ride. As they sat in a cozy chair, the carriage began to leave as if it had been waiting. It was a very slow move for a hurried start. It was to inform the people of the empire that a new crown princess was born, rather than to let Celine see the scenery outside the window. Celine, who was watching the servants of the mansion bowing down in unison and showing their respect to her, turned to Asher soon as it faded away. "How did you get here? Shouldn't you have waited in the imperial castle? I wanted to see my princess as soon as possible. Didn't you kick me out coldly the other day? But what shall I do if you broke the order and came here? I've been studying hard. I filled my knowledge day and night for fear that I might be laughed at by any small mistake. But if Asher breaks the order so easily, why did I study so hard?" So when she asked back, complaining a little bit because of unfairness, he could not hide his disappointment as if his unfairness was more than Celine's. "Is it important to be in order, or am I important?" "Yes." "What's this question all of a sudden?" "I've been running this fast, hoping to see my princess as soon as possible." "Is the order more important?" "That, of course not. How can I compare the order to Mr. Asher?" It was a question of no value, so she answered it in a hurry, and Asher said, taking Celine's hand and putting it on his cheek, "I knew you'd say that." With his words, Celine's heart melted away though she had wanted to complain. It was because he looked and talked as if he only wanted her to think about him, not only now but also in the future. Chapter 271. It was amazing to have melted her mind at an instant. As Celine, with a look of relief, stared quietly into the eyes of Asher, he slowly kissed the palm of her hand that he was holding. There was no young man who had just been longing for affection. It was just her palm at best and above her glove, but his kiss was dense and subtle, and her cheeks were red. "Ah, Mr. Asher. Is it okay to do this in a carriage on the way to the wedding?" On the lips that passed through the palm of her hand and rose to her wrist, Celine called Asher's name, but he did not stop his daring acts. Rather, he had the audacity to look up at Celine without blinking an eye and gave her a look that seemed innocent. As if determined, his ears were no longer red. "What shall I do?" She had seen a lot of men who were more aggressive than this and knew how to refuse it without difficulty, but somehow, she couldn't do it to Asher. No, she didn't even think about doing it. So she left Asher, who was winding his hands around her waist, unsure what to do, and it was not Celine but others who unexpectedly stopped him from doing it. "Wah! Hurrah for Her Highness the Crown Princess! May you bring prosperity to the empire!" It was the voices of the people who started to shout out of the window. Everyone who found Celine's procession blessed her as loud as they could, as the carriage that had escaped Karen's mansion had entered a busy place. So, as hard as a stone, Asher could not ignore the voices of the people outside, who spoke to the wagon, no matter who he was. I don't know why I'm annoyed when they're celebrating. You can't say that because they're the people of the empire. I know that, but until the day of the wedding, why would his people disturb him? Asher, who wanted to say so, straightened himself and moved to the other side of Celine. She watched him do it quietly, and he asked Celine if he could open the carriage window, adjusting his dress. May I open the window? It is the crown prince and crown princess's duty to greet them today, isn't it? It was exactly what Celine should have done, getting into the wagon and traveling to the imperial castle, but Asher shamelessly included himself. He seemed to have not forgotten to greet the people of the empire while he was annoyed. As expected, he was the crown prince. Yes, please. Celine laughed small and allowed it, and the carriage window opened. Then, a huge voice that had a size she didn't know when the window was closed poured into the carriage. Oh, my God. How beautiful. That beautiful lady is about to become the crown princess of the empire. Please make the empire happy for a long time. They blessed today with bright faces and voices in unison. It was she who was getting married, but it was so strange that so many people were happy and were congratulating her that Celine waved her hand with an awkward face. Oh. She waved her hand. I think the crown prince is there, too. Your Highness, the crown prince and crown princess. Please make this country, the empire, a good place. Celine could not hide her joy as if she had been blessed by God. This caused a responsibility that she had never thought of because she realized that this marriage was not only about Asher and her own but about everyone who had grown up in the empire. Their lives could change in the future, depending on how she and he were determined. She could make a lot of children and make their childhoods as unhappy as she had been, or she could not. She couldn't make it disappear completely, but she thought she could keep it to a minimum, just as investing in the academy to fill her private appetite had become a hope and a light for some. Mr. Asher. Yes. Do you mind if I keep doing everything I've been doing so far even after becoming the crown princess? When she asked him what he would allow, he said, with a smile far more intense than she had expected. Of course, you can do everything you want to do as the crown princess, besides what you've done. How could I not do anything that would help you, who believed in me without asking, without questioning, and trusting me? She could have ignored the people and lived like a stupid villain in the past, but she did not think of it at all when she faced those who cheered enthusiastically. I see. Celine's answer was buried in the crowd's shout. It took a long time for the wagon to reach the imperial castle, but there was no place where the people's shout couldn't be heard. The carriage turned very slowly around the capital, informing everyone of the birth of the crown princess, and it headed for its destination, the imperial castle. The carriage was so slow that a procession of people followed it. Even though it was a carriage that turned a long way to its destination, people quietly followed the carriage without showing a single sign of hardship. It didn't take too long before the wagon arrived at the imperial palace. Some nobles, who knew the order of the national marriage, expressed their curiosity since the crown prince, who should have welcomed Celine, didn't appear. Why does His Highness not come out? And now the crown princess would get out of the wagon alone? Oh, my God, this is such a shame. I'm so sorry to hear that she's waiting here alone. He should have come out as soon as the wagon came up in the distance. Asher was not there because he had gone to meet her arbitrarily, and it was unusual enough that no one would dare imagine. So they were sorry for Celine, who was waiting alone in the carriage without the crown prince, and one of the knights who escorted the carriage opened the door. No way, she's going out alone. Oh, poor lady. And, of course, once again, the sympathy for Celine was pouring out, and it was not Celine but Asher who broke all their expectations and appeared out of the carriage first. Why is His Highness there? What the hell is this? It was also the place even the royal families of foreign countries were in attendance, and it should be more than ever worthy of formality, but what was happening? Please get off. Then he reached inside. Don't tell me, he came in the wagon together before the ceremony was officially held. Of course, it was not considered as a taboo for a man and woman to ride a carriage together, but today was the day of the national marriage. With hundreds of thousands of people watching the face of the empire, it was not a matter for the two to boast proudly that they had broken the order and even ridden a carriage together. Because of that, some nobles, calling it an international disgrace, repeatedly denied it, but without waiting, Selene finally took Asher's hand and got out of the carriage. Oh, my God! How could His Highness have done this? Why did he do such a scandalous act in public? But unlike the reactions of some of the nobles of the empire, the majority of the people and foreign nobles laughed happily. This was especially true of the nobles from Croa. It had not been long since Selene had been a lady of the Marquis family of Renard in Croa, but they had identified themselves with Selene because she had been so powerful that the rumors about her had spread quickly beyond the empire and Croa to other countries. The nobles of Croa seemed to be quite pleased at the way Asher was hanging on Selene and behaving as if he were a dull fellow, in violation of the order and the etiquette of the ceremony. They thought that Selene, a noblewoman from Croa, was treated well. Of course, it was not a wrong idea. Asher thought he would do it for Selene if she were to ask him to propose to her again right here, right now. Above all, the character of Lohan, the king of Croa, was quite free-spirited, and he had often shown manners that had been far from being graceful, and they were not in a position to blame others. Well, it could be. He is quite normal compared to Mr. Lohan. Yes, he is. What is the matter with the order? Wouldn't it be important to have a national wedding? Chapter 272. When will Mr. Lohan grow up into such a figure and marry? Unfortunately, he's already grown up. Oh, that's very unfortunate. Lohan was seated in the hall where the ceremony was to be held, so the nobles of Croa did not hide their words. Since they could not enter the imperial palace, hundreds of thousands of commoners gathered outside the gate, cheering for Selene and Asher. Their fondness for Selene was enough to overflow. On top of that, how can they see the crown prince who does not value the etiquette very much and who shows mercy for themselves on the surface? As if he had not intended to break all the order, Selene and Asher had come out of the wagon and slowly followed the path that was filled with tulips. The scent of fresh tulips filled the imperial palace in the warm breeze. With the warm gaze of hundreds of thousands of people who did not spare their congratulations to herself, and of the nobles who had only cursed and abused in the past, and Asher, who held her hand and walked side by side with her. Is it okay to be so happy? Selene took a deep breath, as she felt her heart swell, more than she had expected, and she even blinked several times to see if it was not a dream, and at the same time, she also felt anxiety since she was under pressure. Her lips were dry with tension. When he glanced at her, he gave a little strength to his grip and asked Selene in a very worried voice. The voice outside the castle was quite loud, but his voice was a little louder. You don't look very well. Are you feeling any pain? No, that's not it. Then why? Asher's face darkened as Selene said no. He seemed to be worried that her mind had changed as she remembered his shortcomings that she had never known before. If it was, as usual, he would have noticed in a single moment that it was not, but he was also as nervous as her. It was not like a contractual marriage with Julia, the eldest daughter of the former Duke of Frederick, but a wedding with a woman who he was truly in love with. It was natural that he would be irritated if she showed any signs of anxiety. Selene, who confirmed it because it appeared on Asher's face, realized that he was in the same condition as herself and regained stability on the other hand. It was because she realized that it was natural to be nervous then Selene, with a soft smile, gave a little strength to her hand that was held by Asher. I'm worried that you changed your mind. She opened her mouth with composure as if she was fine now. As always, she meant that there was no need to worry. Still full of tension, Asher made a desperate excuse he would never do as he took it seriously. I don't know why you're worried about that. Of course, I would not. I don't know what kind of distrust I have dared to give, but I hope you're not angry and understand my true intentions. I'm never going to change even after I'm dead and my body and soul are gone. Even after you die? Yes. How can you be so sure of that? It was a ridiculous excuse and insistence. Nevertheless, how can I bully you much more than this when you declare that it is so natural? Now that they were close to the hall where the ceremony was going to take place, they couldn't talk anymore. She could not go inside with him while feeling nervous, so she smiled and said, "Please do so. Don't worry. I'll do it even if you ask me not to." Having relieved their worries, the two continued to walk and entered the hall. The inside of the hall was very quiet and pious, unlike the outside, where the voices of hundreds of thousands of people were making their ears hurt. The selected high-ranking nobles and officials from other countries, and Annie and Jessica, who Celine had specially asked for a seat, and Baron Berboom and Hans were there. Focusing their eyes at her, Celine walked slowly forward with Asher. Soon, once she walked to the front podium and put a tiara on her head, she would be recognized as the crown princess. She was nervous again when she thought about it, and her back was stiff. But no one noticed that Celine was nervous because it had created an elegant and dignified posture. And then, under the podium, Celine and Asher stopped walking. It was a destination that she arrived across a truly long and arduous road. It was a moment when the woman who was considered the most vulgar in the empire, on the continent, transformed into the noblest woman. Celine, who recalled her past and what had happened so far, slowly looked up toward the sound of footsteps coming toward the podium, swallowing her surging emotions. She wanted to see the high priest that would appear with the tiara he had prepared. However, there was someone else there whose face she had seen before but only for a little while. This was the first time that people would see him as the high priest. The emperor. His Majesty. He was the emperor whose face she had only briefly seen at the execution of the traitors. It was not strange for the emperor to appear at the royal wedding, but it was a surprise that the emperor, who was so careful that he was not showing himself, had now appeared. "I guess my father is finally relieved. In the meantime, he's been inside the castle for fear that he would be threatened by any of the nobles." As if he thought Celine would be surprised, he whispered very quietly in a voice that would only be heard by Celine. It had been a long time since the traitors had been executed, and now he showed up. Isn't this saying that he enjoyed a comfortable life in the imperial castle, leaving all the difficult tasks to his son? If he had helped Asher at all, the rebels might have ended sooner. Celine thought she would have a hard time facing the emperor, but that thought of hers was so foolish. And it occurred to her that she might have been unhappy because she had lived under such an emperor without knowing anything. Soon after reaching the podium, the emperor began to utter congratulatory remarks prepared by himself at the very sight of the new crown princess, most of which was to wish for a bright future for the empire and its prosperity. He couldn't make it, so instead, Asher had done in the past. As she listened to the congratulatory message, thinking that, Asher secretly held his hand and whispered to her very quietly. "My father said he would step down soon and leave the capital. Is he saying that he will step down after realizing his position?" No, as she looks back on what has happened, it is fair to say that he is stepping down to save his life. Now, they say that the peaceful era has come after defeating the traitors, but they may show up again to threaten the imperial power at any time. "Give me the tiara," the emperor said in a solemn voice after a congratulatory speech. He took the tiara of the crown princess from a servant waiting behind him and handed it back to Asher. He looked as if he was blessed in spite of not having helped to build such a peaceful empire. As soon as he received the tiara, Asher turned towards Celine. Celine lowered her head a little so that he could put the tiara on her head. With great care, if time had stopped, Asher slowly put the tiara on top of Celine's head. It was a very caring touch, making sure that the tiara would never fall off. Even if he didn't do so, the maids who were standing next to her would make sure that it would not fall off, but he was determined not to create such a situation. Blessed be the birth of the new crown princess. So as the tiara was put above Celine's head, the emperor spoke out and made it known to the hall that a new crown princess had been born. There was still an order to exchange rings and drink holy water, but this alone seemed to have moved the people there already, and Karen, Violet, and Sarah, who was sitting far away, began to cry. When Asher and Celine exchanged a ring made of jewels in the color of each other's eyes, even Annie, who had been by Celine's side to fulfill her self-interest, took out her handkerchief to wipe her tears. They did not spare any congratulations on the birth of the new crown princess and the companion of the crown prince. Chapter 273. The birth of the new crown princess and the crown prince's wedding were a celebration not only of the royal family but also of all the people of the empire. It also meant that the next emperor was ready to replace the current emperor, who had not taken any action under the pressure of the influence of the aristocratic party. After the ceremony, the commoners, who gathered in front of the imperial palace, went out to the streets, rejoicing that they entered a new era, accompanied by alcohol, singing and dancing, and the nobles also stayed on the imperial palace to discuss the future of the empire. Where are His Highness and Her Highness? Well, I've been looking for them for a while, but I can't see them. Where the hell have they been? What's clear is that they are not in the garden. They didn't go back to their room, did they? Well, if they did, someone would have seen it. Of course, the greatest purpose of the nobles was to meet today's main characters, Asher and Selene. Despite the fact that they had already been in the same boat, there were a lot of people who wanted to meet them face to face and talk to them to build friendship. Even if they were the party of the crown prince, who were against the aristocratic party, the nobles were the nobles. Unable to completely rule out self-interest, they found Asher and Selene. Of course, unlike them, there were also Corinne and Marquis Vincent, who waited for Selene with pure intentions, but somehow they could not meet Selene either. I don't think we can meet her. It's the first day of the ceremony, so it's worth it. They've broken down the Great Wall and managed to get married, so why didn't they run away just because they wanted to be alone? At Corinne's very sad voice, the Marquis replied with a tone of voice that he understood. He looked as if he was sad, too. It was none other than the crown prince and princess of the empire who ran away. Even if they disappeared without meeting the waiting people, who would dare to criticize them? Perhaps as if he had expected this, Lohan left the empire early, leaving only a short letter. In the first place, he could not leave Croa for a long time. After a brief face-to-face talk with Selene's kinsmen, the people of the Marquis family of Renard, they returned to Karen's mansion without wasting their time in the imperial castle. They said they knew it would be difficult to meet Selene from now on, so they would take a break at the mansion and return to Croa. It was unexpectedly the imperial castle's garden where Asher, who had left everyone and even his servant out, fled with Selene. It was a place where Selene had also visited before. It was a busy day. Yes. As he said, Selene answered, looking at the calm pond. As he said, it was a very busy and hectic day. It was also a busy day where they might have collapsed if they had stayed in the garden and worked on all their schedules. In consideration of her, he brought her to the garden of the imperial castle, where people could not enter except if they're part of the royal family. You'll be busy in the future, will you be okay? I've been more busy than this. Enough to turn back the time. Although using the hourglass required a full day's sleep, she had used the time she had turned more preciously. Besides, since no one had been willing to hurt herself for trivial reasons anymore, even though she had been busy and tired, she hadn't been very tired mentally. That was enough. I must have dared to underestimate my princess. Yes, so don't worry too much. I think you're more tired than I am, so why don't we go back to our bedroom? When Selene asked if they would go back to their bedroom, Asher furrowed his forehead. He had a face that reminded him of something he hated very much. Why are you reacting like that when I say, let's go back to the bedroom? As she could not understand, she blinked and waited for his answer. Our bedroom must have been crowded by people now. Crowded by people? In someone else's bedroom? Why? Selene waited for a reply again. He hesitated for a moment but slowly replied as if he could not help it. It's the first night of the royal family. It's a custom for them to watch us. They will watch us, won't they? Selene raised her voice and asked back, shouting. Why are they going to watch the first night? Is that what it's like to get married? Selene was so shocked that she became speechless. Her eyelids trembled, and her eyes wandered from place to place. She looked more embarrassed than ever. The royal wedding is mostly a political marriage, so they want to make sure they really spend the night together. They have to have a baby for the future generation. I think it's good to be here, because you are so upset. That was an excellent choice. It's a terrible thing. Why is there such a strange custom? What could be worse than having our first night in the presence of someone? It would be embarrassing to remember, and that shame won't subside until I go to the grave. But what I hate is what I hate, and I can't stay here forever. The bride who held the ceremony would not spend the night in front of the pond. What could be more unfortunate than that? Well, what now? Asher carefully suggested an alternative to Celine's question. He seemed to have something in mind. Would you like to go to my villa which you've been to before? The villa of Asher? At the words of Asher, Celine could conjure up his villa, which had been placed in the woods in a single stroke. It was obvious that no one would come there. Celine was about to nod her head, but Asher quickly added the following words, "But we have a problem." A problem? What problem? I think there is no one there. Surely, no one is waiting for this kind of situation. She urged him to answer quickly, as she thought so, and he slowly answered her question after staring at her with his dark blue eyes for a moment. You know, there's nobody there except us. What? Why is that a problem? Celine, who asked so, could not finish her speech and became stiff. It was because she realized that his words did not just imply that there would be no one to see them. It could be seen through Asher's sunken eyes. He married the woman he had hoped for and would spend the night alone in a place where no one could come, so it was clear that he had only one thought. Then let's go quickly. That was also what Celine wanted. As soon as Celine's answer fell, Asher opened his eyes wide. It seemed like an unexpected answer. Don't you want to go? This time Celine asked Asher. No way. Asher soon took Celine's hand in a hurry, and the two of them disappeared from the garden without a trace. As he said, the villa was empty, not even a butler was there. No, maybe they didn't have time to check it out. Asher, who had always moved into the woods near the mansion, somehow moved into the mansion, inside the bedroom. It was a palace garden with no one in it, but when he moved from an open field of view to a blocked room, it was quick to change his eyes and behavior. She didn't even prepare anything, but Asher's hand was wrapped around Celine's waist. The other hand swept Celine's fluffy, soft cheeks. It was a touch asking for permission. I can't believe you asked for permission even in this situation. Celine soon closed her eyes with her arms around his neck, thinking that he was a really kind and generous man. Then their lips were overlapped in a flash. The polite asking of her will was nowhere to be seen. Now you don't have to look at anyone's interruptions or notice. His behavior was so impatient. It was because he had been patient for a long time, ignoring Celine, who had repeatedly provoked him playfully several times so far. When she felt like she was going to be eaten by Asher without even leaving her bones behind, she shivered. She felt all the more so because she felt power in the hand of Asher, who had wrapped her waist. Ah! When their lips moved apart for a moment, there was an inexplicable burst of breath. Somehow she was a little shy, but she put her hand on his shoulder, then she wrapped it around his neck, but suddenly her view changed and a fluffy quilt touched her back. Chapter 274. After that, the hands that was around her waist brushed her cheek, and they were now busy peeling off the cumbersome piece of cloth that had been wrapped around Celine. Wait. She wanted to tell him to wait. However, she couldn't finish what she wanted to say because of the soft touch that kept her from making a sound out of her mouth, so she just held on to his shoulder. The sensation climbing up her spine made her head disturbed. She gulped helplessly to the strange sensation that she felt in the first contact of this lifetime. A little more impatient, Asher left Celine's lips and bit her neck. Ah! The feeling of it, which was never light, made Celine raise her voice briefly. It was not only once. Asher put her in a corner without giving her a moment's rest. Asher kissed her deeply again, throwing off his cumbersome dress. It was a rough and hasty touch, and it was a time when he had been wasting his time a few times. Wait a minute. Celine, who was able to relax for a moment, was so embarrassed that she pushed Asher's shoulder away. Celine, who was feeling hot with her cheeks dyed red, stared at Asher with a gasp that she had not yet cleared. But it didn't seem very helpful for Celine, who pushed him away to ask something. Celine, who saw Asher frowning, hurriedly opened her mouth. Why are you so, like this? If you want to ask me something, do it quickly. Asher sighed deeply and urged her to talk. So, how are you so skillful? The question of Celine, which was urged in such haste, was enough to freeze Asher, who was so excited and was giving off a fierce glare. What's that? I'm sure there were no other women except me, but how can you make me such a mess although I have lived 10 years longer than you? How did you make my soul escape? This was a strange act that even I did not know. By the way, how are you so skillful? When Celine asked in doubt, Asher's eyes narrowed. His eyes deepened again. He brushed her cheek and asked her back in a very threatening voice. Isn't that a question I should give to the crown princess, who knows if I'm good or not? What do you mean? I've never had a deep relationship with a particular man. Then Celine replied, stuttering uncomfortably, and Asher smiled and kissed her cheek. So do I. I have just learned it as part of my education. I'm glad it made my princess happy. From whom? From the books handed down for the imperial family, and from the one who explained it. Are you so skillful because of the books and this person's explanation? Celine blinked and asked him back as if she didn't believe it. Then Asher replied with a significant smile, creating a long shadow over Celine. Yes, it's true. So would you like to test how far I could satisfy you? Me who just learned through books and explanation. However, his eyes still looked hideous. They were full of pressure, urging her to answer quickly. So how can I not answer you to do that? If you're lying, I'll be angry. At the answer, the smile disappeared again from his face. His stretched hands were still rough and impatient, but they were enough to drive Celine into a corner so that she could hang on only to him. Asher, who had disappeared from the imperial castle with Celine, stayed in the villa for 3 more days, and soon returned to the imperial castle quietly as if nothing had happened. It was only 3 days in a small villa, but it was the happiest and most enjoyable time ever for the two of them. There wasn't much to do. There was nothing to do. They were almost confined to the bedroom, except to quietly eat the food the butler had prepared. That was enough and overflowing. Asher wanted to live in the villa for years, but he knew better than anyone else that he couldn't do that, so he finally managed to get rid of his lingering regret. Not that he hadn't told anyone, of course, but he had told that he would leave the imperial castle for a while, as he had sneaked out of the bedroom and moved the space secretly while Celine was asleep. Thus, the escape of the crown prince and princess on the day of their national marriage ended quietly without much fuss. It's already morning, and after a while, in the sunlight that began to seep through the window, Asher spoke to himself quietly, staring at Celine, who was laying on his arms. It sounded that he was annoyed, as he said that he didn't know why morning was coming so quickly. This had been the case ever since he had returned to the imperial castle. There was more time away than with Celine. But it couldn't be helped. It was also intended by himself. It was because his work had been delayed by the national marriage, and he had fled to the villa with Celine after the national wedding and hadn't returned for days. 3 days was plenty of time to push Asher into the abyss of work. Mr. Asher? Asher was soothing his irritation, staring into Celine's face, and then she slowly opened her eyes as it was morning already. She called out his name, looking into his eyes. Then, as if he had never been irritated, his heart was filled with pride. He was really happy compared to the past when it was hard to see her once a month. My princess is awake. Yes. Good morning, Mr. Asher. Did you have a good dream last night? A good dream? In fact, he didn't sleep very long and spent most of his time staring at Celine. But it was a more satisfying and precious time than just dreaming. Yes. I had a very good dream. Did the crown princess had one, too? Asher answered yes and kissed Celine's forehead briefly. Then Celine grinned and said, Yes, Mr. Asher. How could it be so lovely? It was amazing and mysterious. I can't believe I'm feeling so happy with just this little talk. With uncontrollable emotion, Asher hugged Celine to his bosom tightly. He thought he wanted to spend all day like this if he could. Before long, however, he had to let Celine go, as the maids, who made an indication of themselves being around to mark the beginning of the day. Suddenly, his mood plunged down again in an instant, as if he had never been in a good mood. Even changing his clothes after washing his face was really annoying. It was because he had to stay away from Celine for a long time now after breakfast. So he tried to delay the time, having a meal so slowly as he could, but Celine ended her meal as usual and held the tea her maid brought in as if she was different from his mind. It smells good. It's a tea made of fruit fit for the season. It smells like sweet peaches. Yes. It's a peach tea, Your Highness the Crown Princess. Really? It tastes good too. It's an honor that it tastes good to you. Should I put it on for lunch? Please do that. Celine's praise made the maid blush. Unlike Asher, who didn't want to be apart from her for a moment, Celine, who had become the crown princess, seemed to have adjusted well to life in the imperial castle more than he had thought. It was because the servants followed Celine quite well, and she also spared no effort to adapt. Of course, there were difficulties, such as learning new etiquette, learning what the crown princess should do or figuring out many people, but Celine worked hard without complaining, so most people were happy enough to help Celine adjust to the imperial castle. Everyone liked her enough to laugh lightly at Celine's little mistakes, even though they were the people of the imperial castle, who set strict standards on etiquette. See you tonight, Mr. Asher. Celine smiled softly as she kissed Asher's cheek after eating. He wanted to split his time and dine with Celine, but the people around wouldn't let him and Celine go. It was because the imperial castle was crowded with people who wanted to meet Celine whenever they had the chance. Celine, who spent most of her time studying because she had a lot to learn, had to deal with visitors as well, so she also did not have much time, just like himself. Yes. I'll see you tonight. Chapter 275. He should be glad that the person he loved was doing well, but it was strangely regrettable. And he was annoyed. Your Highness Asterope. A report has arrived that outlines the situation in the south. Shall I let him in? Your Highness. So he was in no condition to focus on his work at all, even though things were going to explode even if he just slept a little and worked. I'll have to do it as soon as possible to meet Celine. He couldn't concentrate on his work because of the thought on this and that, so all he had to do was go over the documents at a slower pace than usual. Let him in. Yes. It was only a long time after the servant informed the visitor and Asher's permission fell. Clearly, if he received those documents, it would increase the number of jobs that he could no longer escape, but there was nothing to be done about it. You don't look so good, Your Highness. Is there anything wrong? Lane, who brought the report, examined the visibly bad face of Asher and asked. It's not been so long since you got married, but you've already had a damned face. You have been madly in love with each other, and you can't have hated the crown princess overnight, and what's going on? As Asher did not answer his question as he furrowed his forehead, Lane let all the servants step back and asked him why. I'll help you if I can. I have to stay in the capital for a while anyway. Really? Then will you go over the documents for me? Yes? If so, I will. As if annoyed more by the answer, Asher threw the pen on the desk. It was because Lane answered that he would, as knew he couldn't. Does the crown princess know the bad temper of the crown prince? I'm sure she may not know. Lane quietly thought of why Asher was angry. He has been busy all the time, but all of a sudden he's so irritated that he asks me to work instead. Lane could reach a conclusion without much thought. It was because he had experienced it several times before. He is dissatisfied with the fact that he's too busy with work and can't see the crown princess often. In addition, he would have heard rumors that the crown princess is doing very well in the imperial castle. No matter how high an aristocrat her father is, she is loved by all, even though her mother is a low-born prostitute. Compared to Julia, who was a candidate for the crown princess before Celine, the difference between them is like night and day. Nevertheless, all the attention of the empire was on Celine, and he could not help but hear it even if he didn't want to. So he could find a very appropriate conclusion without having to worry too much. It was obvious that the disappointment of not meeting Celine and the jealousy of those who would be meeting her on his behalf. It would be a strange feeling for the crown prince, who only knew about his work, but that was all he had. In the very familiar state, as he had done, Lane came up with an alternative as usual. Do you want me to go and see her? What? I am talking about Her Highness the Crown Princess. I have nothing to do until you go over the report and give me the following instructions anyway. I can pretend I am the flaneur walking around the imperial castle because Your Highness can't go. It wouldn't be too bad to pretend to be a servant. Not many people know my face. I've already had such a record several times. It was nothing new. It was Lane's responsibility to follow Celine and report on her condition. So, when the Crown Prince had misunderstood Celine as Lyra, he had been the first to know who she was. Report every hour. Yes, sir. Eventually, as usual, Asher's permission fell, and Lane left the office straight away. He hummed, saying, should use a trick to relieve his feelings at once. Oh, my God, aren't you Mr. Lane? No, I am not Mr. Now, just call me Lane. Celine welcomed him with delight on Lane she met after a long time. She greeted him with a bright smile as if she were an angel who had come down from heaven. Due to her beauty, there is no wonder for the Crown Prince to be worried. Lane gave Celine a smile back, thinking that he understood Asher's feelings 100 times. I am afraid if I come here for nothing as you are busy. As he said, Celine, surrounded by a group of noble ladies, looked really busy. They were all wives of noblemen who were quite high in the position in the empire. Now that the new crown princess was crowned, they deserved to come, whether it was a test or a friendship. As Celine tried to introduce him, Lane began to introduce himself more quickly. I stopped by the imperial castle for a moment on my master's errand. I've known Her Highness the Crown Princess for a long time, so I've stopped by to say hello. This is Pinot Lane. I see. Somehow I'm used to that name. So am I, Pinot. Pinot, where did I hear it? Celine opened her eyes in a circle at the introduction. She asked him if he was still hiding his identity. It was about time that he would reveal his identity. It was also a question of why he had not yet been identified while he had been actively traveling around the empire. By the way, did you hear the rumor? The rumor? Yes. Rumor has it that a new designer is in the spotlight to make a very beautiful and fresh dress. Is there someone like that? Yes. The Crown Princess must know her. Does Her Highness the Crown Princess know this woman? She knows someone like that. Everyone's eyes were on Celine. When did he hear such rumors? It was only a few days ago that she had decided to support and sponsor her. When she had chosen a wedding dress, the designer had said thoughtless words without knowing who she was, and Celine intended that the designer would pay a price for that, but how did he get the news? Celine, who looked askance at Lane with that look, naturally confirmed Lane's words with a face that he must have an underhand scheme. Yes. Well, maybe it's the designer I've been eyeing on. I decided to invest in her this time. Oh, my God. If there were such a designer, I wish you had told me before. It's not too late now. Please go ahead and tell us what kind of designer she is. Lane, who brought up a topic that would draw the ladies' attention at once, naturally went into between them and sat down. He didn't ask for permission, but it was quite natural. She's still unknown in the capital, but she's quite a well-known designer in the south. In order to hold out among the ladies a little more, Lane began to tell them what he knew. There was nothing much to hide. The designer had been also delighted after she had been invested by Celine, and she had made a boast of herself here and there as she could not hide her joy. It was not long ago, but there were already a lot of rumors in the south. What she had been favored by Celine meant that she had been recognized for her ability, and at the same time she had the opportunity to make her name known throughout the continent. So how could she not brag? Lane, who thought it was lucky to hear that as he was coming up from the south, gave them the information moderately and took a sip of the tea in front of him. Then he handed over the baton to Celine. Lane did not come here to chat, but he wanted to watch Celine from a little distance and get information from her. She is scheduled to visit the capital later, so I'll formally introduce her to you then. You may be disappointed because she is still a little inexperienced. That's not impossible. I'm really looking forward to it. I think so too. The more people who make beautiful things, the better. Yes, I'm so glad that we have a wise crown princess who knows a lot of things we don't know. They did not seem to have come for the test, but they seemed genuinely fond of Celine. They could not have hated her because she was the one who had brought them up to this point, who had been quietly oppressed by the aristocratic party in the first place. Chapter 276. Celine was also carrying the power of Croa on her back, and most of the commoners were on her side. Moreover, since she was ardently loved by the crown prince, how could they hate or reject Celine? They deserved to be seen as good to Celine. They deserved to be on her side. Even if they didn't like her, she was a being that they couldn't show it. It's an excessive compliment. I have a lot to learn. When Celine answered with a little blush, the ladies covered their mouths with their own fan and could not hide their favor for her. It was a face to bewilder them without distinction of sex or age. It was a lovely face that fascinated the ladies as if she were determined to. The eyes of Lane, who faced the appearance that evoked even the fondness, wandered for a moment before heading to the teacup, with a sigh that the crown prince deserved to be worried. You're humble. We seem to have a lot to learn from your highness the crown princess. I agree. How blessed his highness the crown prince is. So is the empire. Thanks to this, the conversation went smoothly, and a friendly atmosphere continued. This was a very good situation for Celine, who had just become a crown princess, but it would have caused Lane a great deal of trouble. It was clear that if he reported as it was, it would increase Asher's irritation. As he had long been so, Asher had a keen interest in the people around Celine, in a bad sense. In the past, as he had been far away from her, and it had been hard to see her directly, the degree had been weak, but not now. How could he not be offended when there were so many people who praised and liked Celine before his eyes? If Asher had enough time to see Celine, he would be okay, but he would be angry because he had too much work to do and had no time to see her often. So Lane had to deal with it wisely, just as he had corrected Asher's confusion between Lyra and Celine in the past. However, may it be enough to take an act of small revenge on Asher, who has let him work in the far-off provinces so distantly. I would delay time a little bit so that he couldn't catch it. This was only an act of small revenge when he thought of Asher, who had let him work like a dog. After thinking about it, Lane quietly called Celine, who saw off the ladies who were leaving the tea party. Your Highness, the Crown Princess, I have something to tell you. I have my next schedule. Will it be long? Did Mr. Asher send you? Yes. Celine was as busy as Asher, but she nodded calmly as if she were waiting for the timing of the conversation because she thought Lane would never have come for nothing. I hope to see you again. Me too, ma'am. May you be at peace by then. Celine, who had sent the ladies out first, returned to her neatly arranged table. Lane, who followed her to the other side, said to Celine with a very serious look. His Highness is concerned about you. Concerned about me? Yes, he is worried if the Crown Princess has any problem or is getting well. It wasn't wrong, but the meaning in it was quite different. It sounded as if he came to watch her if Celine was doing well and if she was performing her duties well. Then Celine shut up her mouth. She must have grasped exactly what Lane was trying to convey. Lane hurriedly added an explanation before Celine doubted his words. His Highness Asterope has a terrible regard for the Crown Princess. So he takes care of you while he is busy. He sent me here if he can't work as usual. Of course, you seem to be doing very well, so I think I can make a report comfortably. You haven't been here long, but you're amazing. It was a very long explanation. The remark was prolonged for fear of being doubted, but fortunately, it was not a look of doubt. It was the opposite, but it was so brazen that Lane answered with a very satisfied look. Of course, it was a satisfying situation, because he himself had made this setup. Now Celine would try harder to keep the Crown Princess's true duty and learn what she lacked by easing Asher's worries. That would take away her time more to see Asher. Lane smiled as much as he could, saying, I will run out the time between the two and try to clear up the misunderstanding later. It was the lewd smile of a schemer. Then, I'll go report to His Highness. I hope you'll give favor to me as I may see you again. Yes. Celine, briefly lost in thought at Lane's words, soon nodded and left with the maids to attend the next schedule. The move was a step that was both impatient and determined to do well. Then Lane, who had left room for sabotage and would come back again, headed toward Asher's office with a light step. There was a feeling of satisfaction in his footsteps. Knowing a solution that could solve everything, he had nothing to fear. How was she doing? Reiterating to report, he urged Lane to tell him what he had seen, in haste. It was only an hour, but he looked impatient as if the hour were close to 1,000,000,000 years. She is doing very well. She's had all the love of the noble ladies. You don't have to worry. Lane pretended not to know anything and gave an answer that would upset Asher, and Asher furrowed his forehead. And Lane continued, it seems to be a big factor in the fact that the crown princess drove out the traitors of the empire with her accomplishments. They asked nothing and didn't argue, but they just followed. And she is wise. She mentioned a new designer who she is going to invest, and she got the noble lady's attention all at once. Isn't this all because she wants to help you? I've been thinking about her for a long time, but she's a great woman. You must be confident. Lane had always understood Asher's condition very well and gave an appropriate answer. Why are you doing this today? With such an expression on his face, Asher looked down briefly at the pen he held in his hand. The pen didn't make it that way itself, but his expression was filled with resentment as to why it did this, as he had just had a national marriage. As Lane watched it swallowing his laughter, Asher again opened his mouth whether he had come to his conclusion. For the time being, I'm going to have to forbid anyone else from entering the imperial castle. Pardon me? I can't take her time with the useless outsiders, because my crown princess is working so hard. Then he took a sip of the tea with a more relaxed look, as if it was a very satisfactory decision. It seemed like a strategy to keep others from meeting her if he could not meet her. And Lane was dumbfounded. No matter how uncomfortable he was, how could he make such an extreme choice? Lane managed to close his mouth as it opened naturally. Are you really going to do that? Yes, it's a busy time, so we don't have to bring in any visitors. It's not because of a busy time, but it's just that you don't want Celine to see other people, and that some people who like her were around. I see. As if it was not empty words, Asher called in a person and instructed him not to let in outsiders starting tomorrow. Although it was simply a visit for friendship, the servants who had to cancel it was busy because all of them had been prearranged and scheduled. Then go see and come back at what the crown princess is doing. Yes. Come back in an hour and report. Yes. Somehow Lane thought it was going in a strange direction, but he felt sorry to come up with a solution now. When he saw the more agonizing and struggling Asher, he could ease what he had been badly treated in the meanwhile. If it was not this time, there would be no way he would ever embarrass the crown prince again. So he went back to Celine, and Lane saw that she was learning the history of the imperial family. If she was not good at memorizing, Celine looked at the nobleman with a troubled face, who was listing the names of all the imperial family members and explaining their achievements. Chapter 277. So, His Majesty Franz Homukiden, the first emperor, unified the world and established an empire, created the law of the country, and achieved the unity of the nobility, and the second emperor. Still, as she did not intend to give up or throw away, she slowly memorized the names of the royal family and asked questions from time to time. It really seemed incomprehensible why such rumors had circulated in the past. It must have been the same for the aristocrat that taught Celine history, but his eyes were tender, even though she must have performed slower than other nobles he had taught. She looked totally different from himself, who had fled every day while fighting with his tutor in his childhood, even though it was he who had grown up to be a real nobleman. Yes, you did very well. Isn't it slow? I'm a little slow in memorizing. Well, you're a little slow, but you certainly remember what you learned once, and I can't just say it's slow. Celine smiled relievedly at the remark. Celine took another 30 minutes of history class and put down the book in her hands only after finishing the set amount. Did His Highness send you to me again? Then she asked Lane, who watched the class from a distance. He hesitated to answer because it was so conscience-stricken figure, but he soon regained his composure, thinking that he had no chance but now. His Highness Asterope has barred outsiders from entering so that Her Highness the Crown Princess can concentrate on her studies. Now you just need to relax and concentrate on your studies. Celine, who recalled Lane who left with a smile, entered the dining room with a little frowning. Good evening. As usual, Asher who had arrived first welcomed Celine with a smile. It was with a happy smile that he finally met her. You came quickly. I can't make you wait for my crown princess. As he answered, he kissed Celine on the cheek and took out the chair himself. It was the job of the servant, but it was always the case, so no one thought it strange. As soon as Celine sat down, Asher returned to his seat. It was the beginning of the dinner. I heard you banned visitors. As soon as the servant served the pre-dinner drink, Celine asked Asher. Lane had been talking for a long time, so it was nothing to hide. Asher also brought up the pre-arranged answers, reminding him of what Lane had said. Yes. I heard that the Crown Princess is concentrating hard on learning, and I can't let the useless visitors interrupt your focus. Not that much. It's not necessary to ban all of them. You are the Crown Princess, so you don't have to curry favor with the nobles. You can say that you're okay now, but I'm sure you'll be bothered later. Does Asher really think that I am short of knowledge? Maybe that's why he banned the visitors until I master all the duties of the Crown Princess. Suddenly Lane's advice came to her mind. He couldn't say it, but does he actually feel ashamed of myself for not yet perfecting the manners? Celine, who thought so, soon furrowed her forehead as if it were strange, for it couldn't have been. Others might do that, but Asher could never have done it. Just by looking at his face she encountered every day, she could know that much. Your Highness must be busy, why did you care about such a trifle? It's not a trifle. There is no little thing that is related to the Crown Princess. It's all important. She could know from the look on his face as he answered with sincerity. How can such sweet and kind-hearted Asher think such a profane idea? So did he really ban them with pure intent? Did he really do that to help me study? Upon reaching that conclusion, she could no longer refute what he had done. It just occurred to her that she should study harder than now and repay his heart. Thank you, Mr. Asher. No, please don't overdo it. The Crown Princess is the most important to me in the world. So Asher wished that she would not overdo it, not study hard, and not mix with people and not get much love from them. Contrary to his wishes, and as Lane had planned a minor prank, Celine devoted herself to studying day and night. Have you already memorized all this? Have you been up all night? Oh, my God, how did you learn the etiquette of the imperial family so quickly? Are you going to study a foreign language? Now. The nobles, who taught her, were surprised. Did you hear that Her Highness the Crown Princess is engrossed in her studies? Yes. I heard that. She's already learned enough, but she's been studying day and night, saying she wants to help His Highness. That's right. She even started to learn a foreign language because she wanted to know more about distant foreign countries now. How amazing. When I heard the rumor, I honestly didn't realize it, but I think she's even better as I serve her. I agree. Her Highness the Crown Princess must be having a hard time studying, so I'll have to bring her a sweet dessert. What are you talking about? I'm the one in charge. The servants who followed her were astounded. The Crown Princess didn't even sleep last night. As he put down his pen, Asher said with a sigh. He looked really sad and miserable. She seemed to study day and night, as the servant said. While watching this, Lane swallowed his laughter, which was about to burst out, and answered back calmly, if it is that much, you would be worrying a bit. Of course. It's not just about worrying, the Crown Princess doesn't look at me at night. It's time to enjoy their honeymoon, but she doesn't even look at him at night. There was nothing the Crown Prince directly mentioned, but it was a lament that meant a lot. I don't understand why she's working so hard. Have you shared the conversation? Well, every time I did that, she just said she wanted to do her duty as the Crown Princess as soon as possible. How is it going to be so fun? Lane clenched his fist at two people who were more willing than he thought, so he wanted to dance for joy. Shall I tell the truth now? No, It would be better to solve the problem since I would certainly be in trouble later. But if he thought about it, it would not be too bad to make the Crown Prince feel anxious for a few more days. As he suddenly felt a strange look and came to his senses, Asher was staring at him. What makes you so worried? Yeah? I was thinking about how to handle this. Really? Did you come up with any solution? Oh, no, not yet. Shall I meet the Crown Princess? At the question, Asher's eyes narrowed again. Due to his experience and instinct in the meanwhile, Lane recognized what it was. It was evident that Asher was doubtful. It was dangerous. Yes, good. I can hear the news of the Crown Princess even though I'm busy. Find out. However, the warning, which sounded dangerous to him, disappeared as Asher had just relaxed his face and expressed his trust. To which tune do I have to dance? Of course, it was a dangerous situation because it was true that he was suspected. He needed to resolve it quickly and he left Asher's office to visit Celine, who was studying hard. You're here today again. Perhaps the class was over, so Lane could meet Celine, who was just covering the book. Now that his visit was part of everyday life, she greeted him naturally. I have something to tell you. Please do it. The nobleman who had taught Celine had already bowed and left. Having found no one around except for a few distant wait-and-see maids, Lane insisted that she would stop concentrating on studying and neglecting Asher. What do you mean? Didn't you say Mr. Asher wanted you to see me if I had any problems and if I was doing well? You check me every hour and you've reported that to him. That's true. However, I think it's going to be okay now. What do you mean that I'm okay now? Because Asher has been in enough trouble until now, and I think I'll get caught. There was no worse than being caught and finished. It was necessary to disguise himself as if he had quickly cemented the relationship between the two. I mean, you'd become such a great lady that His Highness Asterope wouldn't worry about. So that's enough. Chapter 278. It was when he was going to say again, wouldn't it be good? It was you. Lane could hear the voice of an envoy who brought death nearby. His back stiffened. Mr. Asher? You must be busy. What brings you here? When Celine confirmed his name, Lane's face fell down. It was only a minor prank, but the forthcoming price was clearly expected to be comparable to the extreme punishment. It was you who played one against the other between me and the Crown Princess. What do you mean? Celine asked with her eyes wide open. As Celine had a face that she didn't know anything, he was angry and flashed into his eyes. He urged Lane to confess his sins. Did you enjoy my panicking? It's not that. That was right. It was so much fun for Asher to be panicking. If he could, he would have stuffed it up in his bedroom and watched it whenever he was depressed. However, if he said so, there was a chance that he would die for contempt of the royal family and he had to make an excuse in a hurry, an excuse he would not die, an excuse for trying to keep them close to each other and not alienating them. As he rolled his head so desperately, he suddenly had a good idea. He thought he could run away even if he didn't get a compliment. Well, I was just trying to find a way because Your Highness Asterope was jealous of all the people in contact with the Crown Princess. Didn't you feel jealous of the noble ladies who visited the Crown Princess to chat with? So Asher had taken the extreme action, which had prevented even visitors, and it might be mean and get a swear. The sudden confession gave Asher a deep frown. What? You? Lane hurried on because Asher seemed to have omitted his words. Do you want to die? Your Highness abandoned your work then and you only thought of the Crown Princess, and I wanted to help you, but it didn't go well. Then Lane gave Celine a look of help. It was a pleading look as if he had had no choice because Asher had only thought of Celine and acted like an incarnated being of jealousy. Celine, who blinked her eyes several times in surprise, soon regained her original face and smiled. What were you going to do while throwing away your work, Mr. Asher? She seemed to like it. She must have liked to hear that Asher had been jealous of the noble ladies who had visited the imperial castle. Asher was ready to yell at Lane right away, but he shut up. Taking advantage of this, Lane began to step back slowly and very quietly. It was a golden opportunity to run away. What kind of jealousy did you do to the noble ladies? The noble ladies were not important to me, compared to you. I only talked with them for an hour or two, and it was all for you. Celine said teasingly. With this, the angry look left Asher, whose ears were flushed with embarrassment. You said you are busy, but you are out of your office now. What are you going to do? Celine looked at Asher's reddish ears and asked if he had been very cute. Due to Lane, who left the unexpected bomb and fled away, Asher was still not able to answer and was avoiding her eyes. It was a disgrace that he had been jealous even to the noble ladies and blocked the visitors from entering the imperial castle. Moreover, it was shameful for him to be caught what he had done so that he could not express it. If you'd only told me that you missed me, that you had done it out of jealousy, I would have been closer to you all day. But Asher's eyes flashed on the words that followed right behind. What were you talking about? I'm not happy to be away from you. If I could, I would like to change my position and become an aide who is closer to you all day. Celine described her mind in her own words and touched the ears of Asher, which had been dyed red. She even kissed them with tiptoe, saying, "It's so cute and lovely to see them at any time. My princess." As if he couldn't bear it, he hugged Celine's waist tightly. Then he kissed her hair. It would not be strange to knock her down on the table right away. There were no more of Lane's pranks left between the two. I have a favor to ask Mr. Asher. When they hugged each other for so long, Celine suddenly opened her mouth. Just say anything. I'll bring it to you, though I would sell the empire. I can't expect such a great thing. It's a very small one. No matter how blind he was to a woman, the servants who were waiting were stunned by the words of selling the empire. Like I call you by your name, Asher. I want you to call me by my name. Being called the crown princess is not bad, but, compared to the past when you called me Lady Celine, I somehow felt the wall. Isn't it a very cute request? As if he really couldn't control his love for Celine, he bit his lower lip. He put more strength on his hand which wrapped her waist. He was about to drop all his schedules and move into the villa in the forest, so she asked for one more favor. Anything. I'll do whatever you want. You must punish the sinner who escaped. Ah, yes. Don't worry. I'll make Lane be punished enough. Though they solved all this misunderstanding, he was the very person who had bothered Celine and Asher for days anyway. They couldn't stand still. Of course, I will, said Asher, and he asked Celine in a quiet voice, as he kissed her on the cheek. I'll take care of it well, so why don't you go to the villa for a while before I do? If I don't visit there now, I'm going to go crazy. It was the same with Celine. Due to Lane's scheme, she had spent all her time with study. Celine, whose eyes were gently bent, nodded silently. At the same time, Asher had all the servants step back. As soon as the servants who disappeared while blushing closed the door, Asher and Celine disappeared as if they had waited. Extra Story 3, A Wicked Woman is a Wicked Woman Forever. While Celine was adjusting to the new environment, Jessica and Annie, who followed her to the imperial castle, also had to adapt. This was because the etiquette of the imperial castle was different from those of the Count family of Vermont. The work of Count Vermont had been often accompanied by a large number of aristocrats, so the servants had also been thoroughly educated, compared to other families of the Count. However, the etiquette of the imperial castle was incomparably difficult and complicated. That was why Jessica and Annie also had to learn it day and night with the mindset of learning new etiquette. But Jessica, how about this dress? Annie took the bottom of her new dress and spun around and asked. At a glance, the delicate lace and frills seemed to be a high price that only the nobles could wear it. How did you buy such an expensive dress? No, why are you bragging about such a dress now? Jessica frowned gently. Well, a little bit. Why? What? Is it weird? No, rather than being weird, it's too much. You're not even a noble. You are just a maid. How do you expect to work in such a dress? When Jessica answered, Annie rather frowned this time. What are you talking about? Who are we? We're the crown princess's maid, aren't we? That's true, but... What's more, we're not a maid doing chores, but close aides of the crown princess, so shouldn't we be dressed like this? Jessica shut up, unable to answer Annie's question. She was right. They didn't have to wear a maid's uniform because they were not the common maids, but the closest maids who Celine had brought to the imperial castle. In addition, they weren't cleaning and serving food. It wasn't because Celine was the crown princess, but that was what all the aristocratic women with beloved maids were doing. There were also aristocratic women who dressed up their beloved maids like themselves to show off their affection and wealth. And it was Jessica and Annie, who were especially favored by Celine and had their own room unlike any other maids. Therefore, it was not strange even if they would wear a dress like noblewomen. In addition. Chapter 279. This dress was bought by Our Lady, no, with the permission of the Crown Princess. Did Her Highness the Crown Princess permit? Yes. She paid for all the expenses. Why should I restrain myself when Her Highness the Crown Princess allowed me to do this? As Annie said that it was a dress that Celine had given her permission to buy, Jessica could no longer blame her. So Jessica stopped answering and glanced over Annie's dress and closed her mouth. It was a look that Annie's dress was still too much. Annie, who regained her bright expression after Jessica had stopped blaming her, looked at the mirror but soon clapped her hands as she thought of something. Come to think of it, there was your share. I forgot. My share? Yes. Your share of the dress. I put an order as I pleased, with the permission of Her Highness the Crown Princess because it was obvious you would say no anyway. Annie brought out a dress that she had put in the closet. It was just as fancy, dazzling and expensive as the dress she was wearing. I can't believe that's mine. Yes, I didn't know your taste, so I picked it out. It's a trendy design, said Annie proudly, raising the dress to be seen well. How do you expect me to wear such a dress? The cold sweat had already soaked her back. Of course, it wasn't that she had never worn a very fancy dress. She had experienced wearing one on Celine's wedding. But it was now different from then. At Celine's wedding, no matter how much she had been dressed up, she hadn't been noticed, and she was able to finish it with a small burden because it had been a place where everyone was dressed up and attended, but not now. Now they might curse her, saying, "You don't know who you are, and you're a bit pretentious." Rumors might be circulating that she was a wicked maid who wasted the crown princess's property. This was also true. It was nothing more than a pretentious act without knowing who she was. That was why Jessica didn't dare wear a dress Annie had bought at Celine's expense, unlike Annie. I can't wear this dress. So Jessica thought Annie was going to blame her, but Annie nodded unexpectedly and hurriedly dressed herself up, putting the ornaments on her head and ears. She didn't seem interested anymore. I knew you'd say that. So I asked for your share because I would be seen as strange as I bought it alone. You're not greedy for this. Then can I have your dress, too? Actually, I picked it for my taste. Yes. Annie, who had finished saying that she was kicking her own blessing, hummed as if she were excited as she saw herself in the mirror while she was putting on a hairpin. Jessica watched this, and she looked somewhat dubious. Jessica and Annie acted separately from Celine even though they were close maids of the crown princess. It was partly because Celine was busy. As soon as she entered the imperial castle, Jessie and Annie couldn't keep up with Celine because she was immersed in her studies day and night. Of course, they followed Celine at first, and she needed only a few maids that could do chores that didn't require conversation. Therefore, Jessica and Annie had been naturally excluded. It was also Celine's consideration that they didn't have to follow her because they had to stand there constantly without doing anything. Rather, Celine advised them to prepare for their future at that time. This was because Celine wanted Jessica and Annie to get married as soon as possible, just like her. In the first place, they had delayed the timing of their marriage though they had been able to get married first, saying, "We dare not marry earlier than our master." So when they were unable to follow Celine, Jessica and Annie, who were quite free, spent leisurely meeting Hans and Baron Bourbon as Celine asked or wandering around the imperial castle. It was unimaginable for a maid. Some of the maids who saw Annie in the colorful dress would politely give their courtesy to her and not to Jessica, who was in plain clothes. Have you seen it? At this time, they're leisurely having tea. I thought some noblewomen were here again, said one of the maids who caught sight of Annie and Jessica drinking tea on the terrace of their room. And one of the maids who were cleaning together whispered quietly as if it were a very secret affair. I asked them with great curiosity, and they said, Her Highness the Crown Princess has given us permission. I heard that, too. I heard all the expenses for the dresses and ornaments were paid by Her Highness the Crown Princess' own money. Oh, my God, they have no shame. I mean, if they're noblewomen then it's fine, but they're commoners. Noble? Don't say such a funny word. They are just commoners among the commoners. They are commoners who met a generous master. At this point it was not Her Highness the Crown Princess, but the maids who had a rise in status. As Her Highness the Crown Princess is generous and kind, she allows them to do that out of consideration. However, they don't know who they are, and they are doing such things. They should be ashamed. Yes, you're right. It's really too much. They might have been like that around the Crown Princess, who was still young, luring her with sweet words. In fact, it was the opposite, but the current Celine was not that image, so the maids who were cleaning up had misunderstood. They concluded and gossiped about Annie and Jessica. There was no need to keep their mouths shut unless they were a noblewoman. Besides, it wasn't just the maids who didn't like their existence. Celine, who was about to leave after class, was caught by a nobleman who was hired as a teacher. Well, Your Highness the Crown Princess. If you don't mind, I'd like to ask you a question. He was a very young aristocrat. What is it? I've heard that you have 2 maids who you have brought from outside, but I don't think I've seen them. When the nobleman asked that because he heard nothing but rumors, Celine replied, thinking that it was weird. Yes, I have 2 maids. I told them to act freely because I don't think they have to be here while I study. Oh, you did. The expression of the nobleman, who answered, so was unclear. And Celine's face was filled with deep suspicion. Why are you asking such questions even though they are just maids, not others? Why do you ask me that? Did my maids give you any trouble? The look on Celine's face was very cold. It was partly due to the misunderstanding which had happened between Asher and herself under the leadership of Lane. Oh, no. I just wanted to know why you didn't bring your maids who you had brought in with you. He did not know that Celine would react like that, so the nobleman rushed to explain and made an excuse, waving his hands. He seemed to finally realize that he had asked a presumptuous question because she had been so kind and generous. What the hell are you up to? I see. If you can't get an answer to your question, it'll be toxic. At his violent reaction, Celine gave a bright, soft smile again, as if she had never had a cold face. She looked forgiving of anything. The nobleman, who was unable to catch the hidden meaning that hid a poison to know the truth, soon dismissed Celine's cold expression as an illusion and laughed at her. But if you ask me, I think you heard something somewhere. Celine, who said so, looked at the nobleman's face and continued. He didn't seem brave, so she was afraid he would run away, being scared. I haven't seen them for nearly a month, but what happened to them in the meantime? Celine asked, looking like she didn't have much of a relationship with them. Since she was not very attentive to them, she wanted him to tell her whatever it was. Are you not meeting them often this month? Yes, I still meet them most of the time. However, since I entered the imperial castle, I didn't have to call them in for work because there were so many other talented maids. Oh, you did. So. There was something really going on. Celine narrowed her eyes for a moment to gauge his intention but soon smiled again. Chapter 280. Yes, they were the maids from the mansion of the former count, so they didn't even know what to do. So I wanted them to adjust themselves to the imperial castle, while I was studying. Wasn't that right? Celine asked as if she knew nothing, and a pity crossed the face of the nobleman. It was also the face of her maids making very big mistakes. Celine, feeling uneasy about this, struggled to open her furrowed forehead and asked the nobleman again. She didn't know what was going on, but she had a hunch that she would have to solve it quickly. So let me know if you know anything. If anything happened. It's awful. I brought them here, so I have to take care of them. How could anyone not want to help her when she said, worrying about her maids would solve problems if anything happened without knowing anything about them. Moreover, contrary to the rumors of the distant past, it was Celine, who was favored by the people of the imperial castle with kindness and benevolence. It was natural to confide in everything he knew. Of course, that was why there were people who dared to speak out about Jessica and Annie who she had brought in. Well, actually. The aristocrat opened his mouth to the questions of Celine that followed several times, and the expression of Celine after hearing that became cold right away. There are rumors that the maids, who the crown princess brought in, are doing something beyond what they're supposed to do, not knowing who they are. They wear fancy dresses, they have tea time, and they play aristocrats. There's also a rumor that all the expenses come out of your pocket. There are not a few people who see them with an axe-side eye. Celine, who recalled what the nobleman had said a little while ago, took a sip of the new tea the maid had poured. It was a very elegant and noble gesture. As Celine drank tea, the noble ladies on the opposite side also picked up their tea with a very graceful gesture. They looked happy as the ban on visits ended, which had been temporarily imposed due to the plot of Lane and the misunderstanding of Asher, ended. I've been looking forward to this moment. I'm so surprised not to see Your Highness the Crown Princess. So am I. You are the very person I can't easily see. So I was surprised when a visit ban was issued. Me too. It's a little late, but it's an honor to meet you like this. Some of their favorite maids were waiting for the noisy noble ladies. Unlike other maids who did chores, they were handsomely dressed. They were the children of a noble family who had little power. They volunteered for their families to become maids of powerful families. One of those maids had met eyes with Celine, who was drinking tea. Celine looked so clear that she felt Celine's eyes, so the maid turned away her gaze. As if she did not dare to see the crown princess, she smiled and bowed her head to take a courtesy. It was a very natural routine for her to flatter others. It wasn't bad to change her face skillfully for her future. What a beautiful child they are. As Celine opened her mouth while looking at the maid, one of the noble ladies smiled with great pride and affirmed. Is that what you see, Your Highness the Crown Princess? How can I be so happy? She's my favorite. In the past, Celine had had little interaction with women and had been treated with contempt and had never thought of it because she had been a member of a rich family, but it was natural to increase personal connections with a combination of a pretty maid and a noble lady in power. Even though her status was a noble, if she was a girl from a powerless family, she was able to gain power with the support of a noble lady, and for the noble lady, she had her own kind of person and could increase her force. It was called mutual help. Yes, she looks smart and can be a great help to you in the future. As you tell me that, I am deeply ashamed of myself. The praised lady blushed a little to not fit for her character. Isn't it your wish for her to have a happy future? Yes, there is nothing better than when a child I like is happy. This was the same for Celine. And for herself, the children were Jessica and Annie. She hoped that the girls, who had helped her get to this position, would be happy. Of course, she was a little affectionate and interested in Jessica, who had never changed, but she didn't intend to abandon Annie, who had the same kind of character she had. She must be the one who would help her in the future because she had a character who had no hesitation to fill her self-interest. I suppose everyone is the same. That's right. I'm sure you are the same, right? When Celine said that to the other woman, she nodded as if it was right. Yes. What about you? Yes? Oh, yes. Of course. What about you? Of course, so am I. As the same question continued, the noble ladies had a look that she was really strange. It was a simple and strange conversation that was not appropriate for the noble ladies to share. So they were wondering, and Celine, with a different expression, said with a straight face. But why are they gossiping about my favorite girls? Yes? There was a momentary silence in the lobby. To ask what she meant, it had been long ago that rumors about the crown princess's maids had already passed beyond the imperial castle. There was no one who did not curse Jessica and Annie, who dishonored the name of Celine, who had won the love of all and ascended to the throne. It was the same for the noble ladies who were now here. Surprised by Celine's sudden remarks and cold eyes, the noble ladies closed their mouths with their eyes wide open. Because of her cold expression, they seemed to be unable to close their mouths. Some people even blinked, thinking if she was the real crown princess. Even though she couldn't understand how the crown princess looked at them with such a hideous look, they couldn't bring up a proper word. That sudden change in Celine's expression was enough to shock the noble ladies. Celine, who had been leisurely spending time, taking a sip of tea, made a friendly and gentle expression again as if she had never had a cold face. She shouldn't get angry in a hurry. Now this was just a warning. It had to be collected at this point. Oh, I made a mistake. I'm not saying that you did. I just heard some backbiting that followed. I wonder why only my maids are being gossiped about when all of you are making such a generous, unsparing investment in them. How odd is that? Ah. Of course, the answer was fixed. Just as Celine had been humiliated for no reason in the past, the reason Jessica and Annie had to hear some backbiting was because they were from humble origins, even though they had Celine's permission. It's more than just ignoring Jessica and Annie, and it's turned out to be ignoring me. I can't let it go. No, I will not let it go. If I pretend to be good like Lyra, it won't be any good to me. Celine put down the cup she held in her hand. Then she wiped her mouth with a handkerchief her maid handed over to mark the end of the short meeting. I don't feel well. I have to get up now. We have finally met the crown princess after waiting for a long time. We can't believe that she'll be ending this meeting even though nothing started yet. When Celine said that she would end the meeting in 10 minutes at most, their expressions disappeared from their faces. However, what can we say as the crown princess says that she doesn't feel good? Besides, they were the ones who saw Celine's face, which was colder than ice, even though it was only a moment. It seemed to be an illusion, but it was a very cold face that they didn't want to see again. Maybe she's really not feeling well. Maybe that's why she couldn't manage her facial expressions. The noble ladies managed to understand that it would not be a rebuke to them and asked her to call them back next time. I hope you get well soon. I hope to see the healthy crown princess next time. Chapter 281. After such a brief meeting with the noble ladies, Celine went straight back to her room. As soon as Celine sat down at the table, Ruby brought out the tea right away. However, her expression was strange, though she would have heard the whole story. Celine hadn't been long with her, but for her character, she had grasped for days. She absolutely wanted to talk about something. Did you know that? Yes. So when asked the truth, Ruby quickly answered yes. She looked as if she had waited to be asked to herself. I was the only one who didn't know even though it's about me. Is there another crown princess who is more foolish than this? I didn't know when to tell you. I've been waiting for the right time. Ruby's answer to the self-criticizing Celine had no hesitation. It was as if she was looking at Annie, who had become a little bit more intelligent. She seemed to want to take this opportunity to become her source of information. It was not a bad idea to have even a maid who had her roots in the imperial castle. No, she needed a maid to deliver the news quickly before something as unpleasant as it was now. Yeah, Ruby would be perfect for it. She was looking for a chance to squeeze in from the start. Tell me. So when she allowed the role, Ruby, whose eyes were glistening, began to tell her everything she knew, to sell someone like Annie to gratify her self-interest. Celine? It was an unexpected person who welcomed Asher, who had finished his work in the evening and left the office. Celine moved to his side and made a smile with her eyes. You're out now. Instead of asking why she had come to meet him, how long had she been waiting, or why hadn't she made an indication when she had come, Asher chose to embrace her with his hand around her waist. I wish you had sent someone to tell me in advance. I just arrived. And sometimes it wouldn't be bad for me to wait for you first. As he was speechless at the words, he stared silently at Celine in his arms. Is there anything else I can say about my lovely wife? Was it bad that I waited at will? Celine asked Asher, deliberately blinking up and down with her rich eyelashes. She looked so pretty. Ha. Asher made a brief grunt and answered by putting his lips to hers. What if someone sees you? Celine tapped him lightly on his chest and grumbled. But it wasn't because she didn't like it, even if anyone saw it. In the first place, it had happened at any time, and when the two had been together, they had never cared about the eyes around them. So none of the servants, who followed Asher and Celine, blinked their eyes. As I've said, I would like everyone in the Empire to see and recognize this if possible. Wasn't it Asher, who crossed the capital in a dazzling carriage? Celine, who recalled the past scene, buried her face in Asher's breast and laughed in a low voice. It was a smile saying she was pleased. With her lovely figure, Asher kissed Celine on her head. It wasn't a conversation in which they talked about important things, but it was a precious time. Asher and Celine, who had been spending such a short time together, soon joined hands and headed for the dining room. It was quite a long way from Asher's office to the dining room, so everyone could see the two walking hand in hand around the imperial palace. It was not appropriate for the crown prince and crown princess, who should always keep their elegance and antiquity, to act that way, but no one cared because it had already become common to hold hands when they were heading somewhere. So, you didn't answer what I asked. Halfway to the dining room, Celine said to Asher, faintly giving her hand strength. What? I asked you if you felt bad that I acted at will. Oh, you mean the first question you asked me. It was a question that he didn't have to answer. Nevertheless, Celine still needed an answer from Asher. She was sorry for him, but it was because she had gone all the way to the office to hear the answer. I can't be in a bad mood, no matter what you do, no matter what you say. What if I become the wicked woman again as I behave at will and not the generous and benevolent crown princess, like the rumors in the past? You mean your true self? I'd love that. That way, no one will stand in our way. Of course, it was a prerequisite that it didn't ruin state affairs, but it seemed to be true that he wanted Celine to become the wicked woman of the rumors and only see him. You should not change your mind. Celine, who got the long-awaited answer, left a very significant answer. Her other hand tickled his fingers and urged him to promise. Celine. However, the actions of Celine brought about a Cr. Julia rather than a definitive answer from Asher. A Cr. Julia of skipping dinner and going back to their room right away. Shall we? Sometimes eating in the room is not a bad idea. But the Cr. Julia was also what Celine had hoped for, and she smiled softly and leaned on Asher's arm. Asher quickly put his hand around Celine's waist and turned toward his new destination. After finding out that Jessica and Annie were listening to idle gossip, Celine began to act with them in a showy manner. She had been busy, and she had been intentionally separated from Jessica and Annie, but it had become toxic, so it was natural for her to come with them. In addition, unlike when they had just entered the imperial castle, they had some adaptation and had no need to move apart from them because she had some spare time. You don't have to get me a dress like this. Jessica seemed unfamiliar with her handsome features, and she omitted her following words. Her face was full of awkwardness. She was a woman who knew her place, so she tended to be overburdened with luxury. But Celine didn't think so. Jessica, it's natural that you can't adapt overnight. But don't you have to adapt for Hans? Hans. Yes, Hans. Jessica blinked and asked Celine for an answer as if she didn't know why she was mentioning Hans. What does Hans have to do with my flashy outfit? Celine gave Jessica the answer in person. Even though you are of humble origin like me, you deserve to be dressed as the lover of Hans, who is only recognized for his ability in the imperial castle. But Hans. Even if his abilities were outstanding, a commoner was a commoner. He was a commoner who was recognized only for his abilities. No matter how rich and powerful a commoner might be, excessive luxury gained nothing but jeers. Why should I dress like a noblewoman, who is not even a commoner in wealth and power, but a lover of a man who is recognized only for his ability? Jessica seemed to be incomprehensible. Celine asked as if Jessica was foolish. Jessica, why do you think Hans will remain a commoner all his life? Yes? Jessica opened her eyes wide as if she didn't know what that meant. The commoner had always been a commoner. They had been a commoner all their life unless their status was elevated by marriage. That was impossible for men but possible only for women. But Celine had no intention of letting Hans stay in that status. It was natural for the commoner to be a commoner forever, but not by law. A commoner could become a nobleman at any time if he was granted land with a big accomplishment. Of course, this had been only in the early days of the empire that the situation had been unstable and war-prone, and it was almost impossible now that the aristocrats with power and money were in full, but it was not completely impossible now even if there was support from a powerful figure like Celine. Had it not been for rumors, she wouldn't have thought of turning Hans into a nobleman, but not now. She thought it would be better to turn Hans into a nobleman because she knew how unfair and bitter it was to be discriminated against by his origin. Jessica, you don't know how I think. Celine stared into Jessica's eyes, which were still full of questions. Chapter 282. If you are a maid of the crown princess and have a talented lover, it wouldn't be weird if you act like Annie. She had been consistent from the past to the present. And Celine really liked it. So how can I not bear a little trouble for your future? She wanted to explain everything, but there were a lot of listeners in the imperial castle. She stroked Jessie's head, refraining from saying anything. You don't know how the future will change, so be prepared. Besides, I want my maid to be the most beautiful in the world. Especially Jessie, my favorite girl, you must. How can I be so grumpy when she says things like that? Eventually, Jessie shut her mouth tight, and they continued to walk to the garden where the noble ladies were waiting. We see your highness the crown princess. As Celine entered the garden, the noble ladies hurried to pay their respects and bowed down. Unlike every day she had met other ladies, they were the same noble ladies she had seen last time. They were unable to hide their glowing faces as if they thought they had been favored by the crown princess to visit the imperial castle again. It was not different from the faces of the nobles of the aristocratic party of the past. Although they were on the side of the crown prince, the nobleman was a nobleman. All of them were interested in following the tide and fulfilling their self-interest in seeking power. As Celine sat down, the maids rushed to pour the tea. It was a natural and fast reaction as if the water were flowing. Celine, who had a sip of tea that had fallen to a good temperature after waiting for a while, opened her mouth to the noble ladies who had been bowing down, taking etiquette by then. Get up. Thank you. Instead of giving the usual greetings as soon as they took a courtesy, she told them to straighten up after a long time as if she had tortured them, and the women's flushed faces were nowhere to be seen. As the noble ladies were unable to erase their faces stained with displeasure, Celine asked them with a puzzled look. The tea tastes good. Why are you not drinking it? Yes. Celine had a face she did not do anything wrong, and the noble ladies could not ask anything and had to bury what had just happened. How have you been? Yes? Ah, yes. How have you been, your highness the crown princess? I managed to get along. How can you react like that? We had barely driven out the aristocratic party, who had eaten away the empire for a long time and gathered together among those who had a single heart. The faces of the noble ladies grew colder and colder to Celine, who treated them as if they were criminals of treason. Celine, who didn't even care about it, said, pointing to a prepared table a little away, Annie, Jessie. You guys sit down there, too. Yes? Yes? Don't you think you should taste the sweet tea since it's been here for a long time? Celine's words hardened the noble ladies, stopping their movements. How dare you let the maids sit at the table next to the meeting of the crown princess and the noble ladies? Of course, it was not unusual. This was because most of the maids were nobles, so there were also cases of sitting at the same table. Therefore, even though they were maids, they often received the treatment as a noblewoman. Such girls were treated completely differently than ordinary maids. It was not strange to sit at the next table, as Celine said. But Jessie and Annie were not. Aren't they really from humble origins? It was unparalleled to receive the same treatment as the nobility-born maids. To think so was the same as the maids of the imperial castle, and no one prepared refreshments even though Celine had already asked for it. What are you doing? Yes? What are you doing not getting tea ready? Ah, yes. Celine pointed to one of the maids and asked, and only then did the maids rush to prepare a table for Jessie and Annie. In the end, Jessie and Annie sat at a table prepared for themselves. Therefore, the noble ladies, unable to control their facial expressions, closed their mouths and stared at them. Their expressions showed that it was hard to believe. "All of you don't have bright faces," Celine said to the noble ladies. It was because they expressed their feelings on their faces due to Celine's rude behavior. They did not even think about taking care of the situation. What else can we say? The noble ladies still remained silent and could not hide their discomfort. Then Celine laughed in a low voice and asked them, "Are you doing this because my mother is of a humble origin?" Of course, everyone who heard Celine's question was stunned and gasped. As if it was insufficient that Celine mentioned her origin, she sought the answer from the noble ladies. At this, the noble ladies hurriedly denied, shaking their heads. "That can't be. What makes you say that? Who would dare have such impure thoughts on your highness the crown princess?" They wanted to prove their innocence by opening their heads if they could. But is that really what you want? Celine didn't think so. Really? Then I'm glad. I must have misunderstood. I was wondering if you were very uncomfortable because my origin is not so good. It's really weird, isn't it? In the past, I never had a hateful look on my face at the folly acts that the late Princess Frederick did to me. Julia had once asked about tea to test Celine during a visit to the mansion of the former count. It had been set up to laugh at the stupid villain. But Celine had turned the hourglass back to deal with it calmly, and in the end, she had been able to pass on quietly without being laughed at. It was an ordinary world. A world in which those who truly held power must be treated well with a smile no matter what unfair treatment they received. But what about now? The noble ladies clearly showed signs of displeasure in front of Celine, who they could say had reached the highest and noblest place among all women, despite it being a trivial thing. All of the things they were displeased of were very trivial things, and they could smile and pass lightly. If the crown princess were Princess Frederick, could they have taken such an action? Celine, who thought they would never have done it, continued, "But you were so honest about your feelings that I couldn't help but think so. Look, you still can't hide the look that you got pricked at, can you?" Celine, who said so, added a word after a leisurely sip of tea with a smile. "This makes me misunderstand." There was a silence in the garden. It was only then that they noticed Celine's anger even though she was smiling. It was the same for not only the noble ladies but also the maids. "I've been thinking about it lately after hearing some bad rumors." As all of them were speechless, Celine spoke again. "If it had been the eldest daughter of the Frederick family, not me, would it have been this rumor even if her maids had done the same thing? Bad rumors?" Everyone could think of one thing without having to ask. "Is that why you brought Jessie and Annie?" Only then did they knew what Celine, who had brought the maids, who had been missing for a while, meant. The crown princess used them to test the cause of the rumor and warn them. That's a misunderstanding." It was not a misunderstanding. It was true. Contrary to the past rumors, she was no longer a villain but Celine herself, so she could show her dislike. Of course, it was not very irrelevant to Celine's origin. As she said, it was clear that no strange rumor would have circulated if Princess Frederick had been the crown princess, who had taken the elite course. "I'm glad then. I was also wondering if my background and my fragile appearance had misled you. I did it because I thought anyone would not spit on a friendly person, but I was about to change my mind because I didn't think so. But as you said, it's a misunderstanding. I'm in conflict. What kind of attitude should I take?" She told them to be wary of her and curry favor with her. She said that they would not try to climb up and eat quietly when she was good to them. Chapter 283. It was also a warning that she would be changed like a wicked woman of the rumor again at any time. Since then, conversation with the noble ladies had become a very informative time for Celine. It was because she realized that no one would be making rash remarks anymore. On the surface, she still smiled benevolently, but as they noticed that every single word she uttered was giving them a big warning, there was no more talkative person, compared to the first meeting. Celine showed unsparing kindness to the noble ladies, saying that she liked it. That was enough to deal with them. Of course, there were some noble ladies who had been dissatisfied with the pressure on them, as soon as Celine, who had spent her days only in business, was crowned as the crown princess, but she knew the most effective way to control them. By the way, I've reconsidered the documents that I've put off to adjust myself to the imperial castle for a while. I found a very interesting business there. It was information that would satisfy the noble lady's self-interest. Even though she had become the crown princess, she found an interesting business after reviewing some documents, not false, because there were no other sanctions for doing her own business. And no one knew that all the business Celine had worked for was a great success, so it was enough for the noble ladies to put down their pride and bury it. What kind of business is it? I am curious. Several noble ladies asked Celine about the business she was interested in, and this fixed their eyes on Celine, quietly affirming as if other noble ladies were the same. Celine, facing the look, said with a gentle smile, "I should tell you that you're curious. It's a project to collect new jewelry from special places." New jewelry? Yes, it is said to be a jewel as beautiful as the sea. You can grind the jewelry and scatter them on your hair or dress to give off a subtle glow. The jewel, as beautiful as the sea, was a priceless treasure to be collected from the sea. Because they were only found deep in the water, it was impossible to collect them without special technology and devices. Celine, of course, did not confirm for sure but decided that it would not be much different from what was written in the letter because the person who proposed the project was none other than the owner of the jewelry store. Even so, the jewelry store's owner would have no difficulty in collecting and selling jewelry alone without getting investment. Nevertheless, the reason why he had sent the business plan in the letter and asked for help was quite obvious. He's thinking of taking advantage of my reputation. Jewels invested by the crown princess, jewels worn by the crown princess. He could probably get a few times more expensive than the right price. It would also be easy to interact with other countries. She had thought she'd refuse it because he had planned to use herself to make profits several times, but she had replied that she'd soon look at the real thing and make a decision. If it was a business for the common people, I would have refused, but it was a business for the nobles. The money of the nobles was overflowing. Furthermore, many nobles found it a pleasure to buy and show off something a little more expensive and rare than others had. So, wouldn't it be appropriate to offer expensive and precious items as they wish? By investing the money I earn through the investment for the common people, I will be able to protect the dignity of the crown princess. Have you seen it yourself? No, I'll see it this time. Ah. I see. The noble lady's eyes quickly clouded by the news that she had not seen yet. What a fool. Celine released another valuable piece of information to give them hope. But I think it's a very beautiful jewel. It's a secret, but, because the man who sent the letter runs the largest jewelry store in the empire. He would not have talked nonsense because he has a sharp eye. The person who runs the largest jewelry store in the empire? The eyes of the noble ladies began to shine again because they seemed to recognize him, though she had not mentioned where the jeweler was or had not mentioned his name. When can we see it on the market? Well, I'll have to see him first. No matter how trustworthy he is, I can't confirm my investment until I see it. Are you going to call him to the imperial castle? I suppose so. I still don't have much time to go out. I'll have to look at it closely. At her answer, the noble ladies began to drink tea, clearing their throats for nothing. They seemed to want to see first before coming out in the market. They looked impatient to ask her to call them again. I've heard that since the collecting site is a special place, it is edible in a small amount. Besides, it will be perfect for decorating. At the words, Countess Korjin opened her eyes wide. It was because her husband, Count Korjin, had a business selling jewelry or gold-sprayed desserts. Of course, as he even used bad jewelry not to be edible, they had only been used as decorations to entertain parties, not for the purpose of cooking. Nevertheless, the price was higher than the gems, so they had no difference from expensive ornaments. But the edible jewelry? I'm really looking forward seeing it because it has many colors. Your Highness the Crown Princess. When the last piece of information was leaked for her, Countess Korjin called Celine in a very impatient voice. She didn't say anything else, but she seemed to be called in as soon as the jewels entered the imperial castle. Oh, I'm afraid I'll have to finish today's conversation now. I still have a lot of business under review. But I can't. If I give you an easy answer, it's not fun to make you roll on my palm. As Celine announced the end of the conversation, there was regret on the faces of the noble ladies. Although they received information, they only got a few. Still, the information was not negligible, and because Celine left an aftertaste to release the information that would benefit them, they were more anxious. It is a little short meeting, but it's not your first time to see me, so I'll see you next time. Celine, who had planted a glimmer of hope for the noble ladies, left the garden without regret. She didn't even look at the noble ladies who were quick to salute her who was leaving. Though she had acted rudely from beginning to end, no one complained to Celine. Rather, they had a very bright look on their faces in hopes she had instilled in them at the end. I've been too much tender after the revenge, even though it is most effective to coax them on the premise of benefit, whether they are originally a noble or a commoner. Even if they are a family, they can betray one another, but they don't do that if they have some relationship in money and benefits, as long as they can gain profits. And it was also best suited for Celine. Jessica's eyes were a bit uneasy as she looked at Celine, who had unilaterally ended the conversation. In the past and in the present, she was always full of worries about Celine. It was partly because Celine had taught her a lesson that people could betray at any time, using Lyra. Celine said nothing to Jessica because it was easier to cope with the Julia when she was worried than just being optimistic. Unlike Jessica, Annie looked triumphant. She seemed pleased that Celine had made the arrogant noble ladies quiet in a few words. It was the same with Ruby. Celine had been showing only benevolence ever since she had entered the imperial castle, so Ruby had no idea that it would be so easy to solve it. What is left now is the servants. Punishment remained for fools who dared to talk rashly about what happened in the imperial castle. She wanted to find them one by one and make them pay for it, but she couldn't find all the numerous servants that spread across the imperial castle, so she decided to let it go quietly just once. If she found each of them and scolded them, she would only get the stigma of being the crown princess who tormented the servants. Rather, it was better to raise the value of Jessica and Annie so that no more backbiting could come up. Chapter 284. Furthermore, looking at Ruby's expression, it seemed as if she was going to instigate the servants of the imperial castle like Annie before. Public opinion changed rapidly after so many times of meetings with the noble ladies. It was not because she had leaked different information to the noble ladies, but because she gave the same information over time for them to compete with one another. It was the purpose of the noble ladies to get information that others did not know by showing a little better to Celine. Not only that but also occasionally, she had leaked information to male aristocrats, to create a situation for them to scold their wives. These days, I'm just told about the crown princess everywhere, and I feel really strange. Asher, with a very sour look, said to Celine as if he was annoyed. It was not because Celine had created competition among the nobles, but simply because they had mentioned Celine. He seemed to be irritated. It was the only way I could feel at ease. So Celine replied, a little troubled, and the eyes of Asher turned grim. Shall I get rid of them then? Get rid of them? If the crown princess feels comfortable at home, I should get them out of your sight. The noble ladies? The look was so serious that she asked him, and he soon nodded. If you want, I should. Oh, my God. If you do that, you will decorate a page of history as a rare tyrant, so I'll just have to take care of it. As soon as she answered so with her fork down, Asher gave a very pleasant laugh. Fortunately, the expression on his face seemed to be a mixture of lies. I see. You're so worried, and I'll have to restrain myself. Don't even think about it in your dreams. I hope you pay much attention to me not to think of it. As if it were his true heart, Asher's eyes grew thicker. It was because she left Asher too much to gain the upper hand in the relationship with the nobles. She didn't become the crown princess to fight the nobles. She had married Asher because she had wanted to be happy, and as he had been the crown prince, so somehow she had become the crown princess, but her position had already turned around. I'm sorry. You don't have to apologize. I loved that figure, too. Do as you please. Instead, don't leave me too alone. I might feel lonely and dry. Celine, who eventually stopped eating at the words, moved to the side of Asher. As if he no longer had an appetite, he also put down his fork and took Celine's hand. Shall we go up to the room? We'd better do that. The meal, we can have it upstairs later. As Celine brought up the words he had been waiting for, he was quick to move as he rose from his seat. It was an agility not easily seen. As if he liked everything about Celine, she also loved even his haste, saying that it was so cute, and she rose from her seat following him and called him as if she had a good idea. Mr. Asher. Yes? You want me to take care of this quickly, don't you? Yes, and I'd like you to look at me. I don't like someone who talks about you. As if to tell her if there was a way to speed things up, Asher urged her to answer. Well, do as I say. How? Don't blame the person who tells my story. She didn't want a way to solve it, but she wanted him not to disturb her. When she said so, he looked reluctant, apparently unwilling, because he must have blamed the person who had told her story. You want me to talk about you with someone else? Do you want me to play with someone who praises you? I don't want you to play with them, but please don't stop them from bringing up my story. Don't you think I'll have to finish the job only if the rumors spread quickly? As Asher furrowed his forehead a little bit without answering, Celine said, as if she could not help it. If you keep it until it's done, I'll grant you a wish. A wish? Yes, a wish. Any wish? Anything I can do. Only then did the dissatisfaction that had settled on his forehead disappear and his eyes began to shine. Even though she did not attach such a condition, he was willing to do anything if she asked for it. All right. Just trust me. Naturally, Asher answered that he would do it. And fortunately, with his determination to make a wish to Celine, he clenched his teeth and endured the annoying moments as the story of Celine had been exchanged numerous times among the nobles, and Celine was soon able to get the situation she wanted. Her Highness the Crown Princess cannot have a meeting today. What? Why? I made a reservation a week ago and I was told to visit today. Annie's stern words startled the nobleman, who had been waiting for his turn for a long time in front of the reception room. When she checked the list she was holding, his name was written as he said. Annie realized that he had been omitted by her mistake and rolled her eyes for a while with her mouth shut. What shall I do? I should have handled it as I was told. However, the reception had already been completed. Celine had committed the work to her as she had trusted her. But even though she was worried about it, the situation didn't improve. Let's call the nobleman again next time. It was possible because she had a strong background called the Crown Princess. Annie answered vaguely as if nothing was wrong. Are you sure you have a reservation? That's weird. I don't think so. Why isn't your name written on it? What are you talking about? What nonsense. Apparently, he had visited the imperial castle in person, made a reservation and even received confirmation. That was why he was able to get to the reception room. The nobleman was so unhappy that Annie cocked her head and pretended to look at the list again. However, when she soon shook her head and gave a negative answer, the face of the nobleman turned blue. Please check it again. I'm sure the Crown Princess wants to meet me. The nobleman desperately clung to Annie for confirmation. Then Annie looked perplexed by this. It was because it was heartless to treat the person so coldly, who had waited for a week and barely faced his turn. For a nobleman, he looked desperate and she tried to pass on, but Annie went into the reception room as it was right that she had made a mistake. Your Highness the Crown Princess. Can you give a person about 10 minutes? As soon as the door was closed, Annie with a very troubled face asked Celine. Celine, who was about to leave the reception room, folded her eyes and asked Annie at the familiar question. Who is it? It was because Annie had made many mistakes on the visitors list. Annie, who had a short temper, often made mistakes. If it wasn't for her connection in the mansion of the former Count Vermont, she wouldn't have given her eyes to her. She had put the job to her, in high esteem for her ability to identify and properly deal with people in a short time. Annie had made frequent mistakes, but she had been so good at coping with the mistakes, and Celine thought that she would soon attach a meticulous person to Annie. So she asked his name as if she would allow it. He's Viscount Straw. Viscount Straw? Yes, I thought he had something important to talk with you. There had never been a case as those who wanted to meet Celine had no trivial matter. Everyone came to see her with an important purpose to satisfy their self-interest. Annie, who thought this would be the case again as it had been usual for her to meet one or two more people even if she had made a mistake, was unexpectedly rejected. Rejected? Yes. I won't meet him. Why? Annie opened her mouth wide when she suddenly got into trouble. Jessica, who was waiting behind Celine, also opened her eyes in a circle and wondered. Annie, who thought there must be a reason for this, asked. I'm sorry, but can I ask you why? He is a remnant of the aristocratic party. He had a very good relationship with the former Count of Vermont. He managed to escape punishment. Chapter 285. He was a man who had frequently met with Count Vermont on business. Celine remembered seeing him in the mansion several times. Only then did Annie raise her voice, clapping her hands, remembering how many times she had seen him in the mansion. My God! I remember him too. But why is he so old? I think it's only been a year. She made a fuss as she hadn't recognized him because he had been looked older for 10 years. It was probably because he had been through a lot. He must have run away desperately so as not to be caught. Jessica also raised her voice as if she remembered. To think of him, I remember, too. Oh, my God. How is he still in the capital? I thought he would have been punished. So did I. Why didn't he get caught and punished? Well, was the charge light? Maybe it's just a relationship that had been keeping a deal. Given the lack of clear memories, it was highly likely that he had been involved in a really insignificant level of work. Maybe that was why he had escaped without punishment. However, if she was determined not to meet him, Celine urged Annie to go out soon. And you can handle this kind of case from now on. If it's not a big mistake, you don't have to report it. At the very least, it was only a meeting order. It was all right to adjust the order on Annie's position. Celine didn't want to get involved in such trivial matters anymore. Even if mistakes were frequent, there was not much damage. And since it was Celine who had decided not to play the benevolent crown princess anymore, she thought it was okay for Annie to misplace the meeting order and go against the minds of the nobles and other visitors. Don't do anything against the law, though. Just act only within my range to save you. Annie nodded quickly at the remark. That meant that the slightest of the offenses were to be saved. It was good to hear. Don't worry. I'll take care of it well, even the work of Viscount Straw, in my position. Annie, who gave a bold answer, left the reception room immediately. Then, Viscount Straw, who had been waiting for Annie, rushed to her and urged her, what happened? Annie shook her head with her arms folded. I can't help it. How come? You should know that better. What? Annie's eyes were very cold. You would know your sin very well. However, as he maintained that he still couldn't understand, she was forced to add an explanation. Even though the places were different, you had seen the crown princess a lot in the past, so you don't need to even have an interview with her. At the words, the eyes of Viscount Straw were bulging out. Well, that's a thing of the past. I only helped the former count to make a deal. How can a nobleman not have made a deal with Count Rosent? And as you can see, I wasn't even punished. You don't think you're forgiven for not being punished, do you? Her Highness the Crown Princess does not want to meet anyone who has been badly involved in the past, so please go back quietly. The head of Viscount Straw, who was making a passionate speech, fell helplessly at Annie's stern answer. He seemed to think it would be okay because he had not been punished. And he had been given permission. While the disheartened Viscount Straw stood in raptures, Annie went past him and said, I'm thirsty. I wish someone would bring it. They're all busy, so I don't have anyone to order. It was like asking him to listen. As a result, the eyes of Viscount Straw were shaking relentlessly. He seemed to be in conflict. It was because he had to give up the pride of the nobility. But in the end... Wait a minute. Viscount Straw abandoned his pride and hurried out of the front of the reception room. Not like a nobleman, his steps were very hasty. Annie's mouth slowly rose as she watched in a daze as if she didn't know it would work. The existence of a nobleman was so easy to deal with. It didn't take long for Viscount Straw to bring a cool drink for Annie. "It's more precious than I thought." Celine smiled contentedly as she touched the jewel brought by the jeweler's owner. It was a precious and beautiful jewel that was rarely seen. The blue-centered color of the jewel, which was mined in the sea, attracted her attention. There were also yellow or red, but the most beautiful of all was blue, which looked like the pupils of Asher's eyes. Looking at it for quite some time, the jeweler's owner's face had a satisfying smile. "Is it edible?" "Yes, it's harmless unless they eat a lot at once." If they don't eat a lot, Celine was in trouble. The price was high, and it would not be enough to eat in large quantities, but it must have been impossible to avoid responsibility if anyone ate in large quantities, just in case. What if they eat in bulk? Nothing has been confirmed yet. Then set the correct standard. If there's any damage, I'll be held accountable as well. All right. How much are you going to give to the market? What's the price? I'm going to release it at a very high price. It's a premium by name. I see. It was desirable because when he released it at a small amount at a high price, it would increase the price, and the value would increase and everyone would like it. So I hope your highness will help me make a bigger profit. Me? What? Celine asked back, knowing what he was going to ask. I'll give you first all the jewelry I'm going to bring in, and I hope you'll wear it. Who else can see great results from promoting as much as the crown princess? Celine replied, raising her lips when he asked for a promotion instead of offering jewelry. 30% of the sales. Yes? Donate 30% under my name. Donation. Where? To my facility that I'll build in the future. When asked to donate 30%, the jeweler's owner was in agony. He seemed to calculate how much influence he could have. Celine continued as if he was foolish, I already know you're making more than half the profit, so don't pretend to worry about it. The jeweler's owner laughed that he couldn't help it because he was actually earning nearly 60% of the profit. It was not a bad deal because using Celine's reputation, anyway, he would have made more than 60% of the revenue. In addition, she was a woman who had made her name known on the continent beyond the empire, so there was a possibility that he could reap the profits he would donate. I see. I will do that. Please bring the contract next time you visit. You have to fill out everything I said. Yes, I'll see you soon after I'll fill out everything. But what kind of facility do you mean that I have to donate so much? Jewelry sold at a jewelry store was accompanied by craftsmanship, and the amount was inexplicably high. So 30% of the sales must have been a huge sum. What kind of facilities are they going to spend such a large sum into? Celine replied with a silly smile on her face to a man who seemed to have a dangerous imagination. You don't have to worry. I won't allow any dangerous facility. It's the only facility that can keep my place stable right now. Meeting people's expectations was exactly what Celine chose to keep her place. Celine built a facility by combining all of her wealth with the maintenance fee of her dignity paid to the crown princess. There were 3 facilities she built. The first thing she planned was a medical institution, followed by a school, and the last one was a library. All of these were facilities that were available for free to the commoners. It was another facility than the academy, which required conditions. For the medical institution, in particular, a huge amount of money was expensed in their medical staff and medicine compared to other institutions, but Celine also had a lot of money in the first place, and people who were willing to donate money poured in from all over the place, and she didn't have to worry at all. No, it had reached the point she had to think about receiving whose donation. If this keeps going on, they'll say, it's better for the crown princess to be the emperor. Chapter 286. Asher said, sitting next to Celine. It was a patter of grumbling, but his expression was soft. He had said he really wanted her to be a wicked woman and be isolated, but he also seemed proud of Celine, who was loved and supported by everyone. That's impossible. It's a great and difficult place, and who dare say that? If they did, it would be a joke. No, I'm sure you'll do well. Then I'll have to think about it. The seat. I got it. I'll be ready to give you the seat any time. After a moment of pleasant conversation, as if there was really a separate matter, Asher opened his mouth with a serious look. I think the department you suggested will be created soon, under the name of the Crown Princess's business. Oh, my God. Really? Yes, so now you won't have to accept the donation. It meant that the facilities created by Celine would be registered as official facilities of the Empire and that they would establish a department to support the operating expenses under the name of the Crown Princess. There was nothing new because there was no Crown Princess or Queen who had not run a national business until now. It was nothing special except that it wasn't a business that had been poured out a huge amount of money like Celine. Thus came the department for the Crown Princess, and support was possible without difficulty. No, I'll keep getting the donations. There's a business that I've allowed for. Then why don't you divert the donations to another place? No, I'll keep putting them into the facilities. We need a lot of money to make sure that no one gets discriminated against. I don't want to see my facilities tremble and be hard on money. She didn't like to waste too much of it, but she hated it all the more if it lacked and didn't work to its original purpose. In addition, I think we can manage our budget transparently because the department has been established in the Imperial Castle. We can recollect the rest of the budget together and respond to natural disasters like infectious diseases, so there's no reason to stop receiving donations. No rich country has ever had a natural disaster. It is simply the will of heaven. Celine had prepared a budget for this, but if she could help just in case, it would have been better. In her stern answer, Asher took her hand without further ado. I was stupid. You're wise, as expected. You're not stupid. I've only just realized as I've been with you for a long time. After all that remained during the conversation, which ended with praise for each other, was a smile. I have to go back to the Oval Office now that my break time is over. What's your following schedule like? I'm going to look around my facilities. They've just opened. I'm going to look around to see if the new building is also going well. I see. I'll have to put a firm guard on you. Oh, come to think of it, what happened to the person in charge I asked you for? I've taken care of it well as you asked, of course. Then I'll have to look around with him. It was none other than Hans who Celine asked Asher to appoint as the head of the department to work with her. There had been a limit to his promotion because he was a commoner and a poor background among the commoners, but with Celine's full support, no one could stop him from rising. It's an honor, Your Highness the Crown Princess. I will do my best. Hans, who dared to put even the nobles under his feet, bowed down to Celine, unable to hide his tension. Hans, I hope you do so that there are no more people living unhappy lives. I'll keep it in mind. Standing behind Celine, Jessica watched him with a tearful face. And Celine called her, Jessica. Yes? I can't go to the facilities every time, and I'm busy with other things, so make sure to stop by the facilities frequently in the future. Me? But I am just a maid. Anticipating Jessica's following words, Celine answered without hearing them. Yeah. You're the only one I can trust, right? And Hans, Jessica is still immature in this kind of work, so I hope you'll take good care of her. Yes. Hans would be even busier from now on, so he wouldn't have time to meet Jessica. It was to be considerate and to give Jessica a seat like Annie to solidify her position. The two were involved in a project that a huge amount of money had been invested and would continue to be praised in the future, thus promising a bright future. New medical facilities were being built, so until completion, they had been operating in existing buildings. When she opened the medical facility's entrance door, it was crowded inside because of a long line of commoners from the entrance. When she visited to see if they were handling it without any problems, people running around sweating on the soles of their feet opened their mouths wide and fell flat on the floor. I'm seeing Your Highness the Crown Princess. Did he say that she is the Crown Princess? It was only a matter of time before even the sick commoners lay face down on the floor. It was not long since it had opened, but no one complained about it because of the rapid pace of patient care with huge capital injection. The crown princess who truly cares for the common people. Her rumors of an unhappy childhood had already spread across the empire and the continent. So how could they not have a sense of intimacy unlike other noblemen and royal family members? Moreover, as Celine smiled benevolently at everyone, their affection and admiration became more maximized. I wonder if there is any difficulty. Of course not. As it's just the first time, we're busy with people, but I think we'll find some stability in a little while. At Celine's question, a medical staff answered as if he was much grateful. This seemed not to be his own idea, but no one refuted it. I'm glad then. But just in case, I'll let you know the contact person. It's Jessica, my favorite and trusted girl. Celine's explanation drew everyone's attention to Jessica. Jessica blushed as if they were seeing her as a great woman. Jessica will stop by here once a day, so please tell her if you need anything difficult or necessary. Thank you. So Jessica, who was just a maid, became a preacher of the great work of the crown princess, and the ones who would degrade her were gone, so Celine's worries disappeared too. Besides, how can I continue to worry because Jessica has done better than I thought she would do? Adhering to principles and being virtuous, Jessica was the most appropriate person for her duty. It was a bit difficult because it was a matter of being independent, not serving someone, but she did her best with all her heart. Jessica looked so bright and cheerful that she couldn't be compared to herself just like in the past, as she met Hans once a day and was doing something that was rewarding. There's a lot of praise for Your Highness the Crown Princess. I told you not to call me Your Highness the Crown Princess, Corinne. I don't want to call you the Marquise, either. How dare I call the name of Your Highness the Crown Princess? Please call me by my name when we're alone. As if they had met for the first time, Celine acted like a child and asked her to do so. Corinne smiled helplessly and called her name. The corners of her mouth were filled with smiles. I get it, Celine. I'll do that only when nobody's around. It wasn't just to talk to her that Celine called Corinne to the imperial castle. She wanted Corinne to be the headmaster of the new school. As Celine had already mentioned it in a letter, there was no need to repeat the explanation. Celine just waited for an answer that Corinne would do it. If she accepted the job as the mistress of the Marquis family, who now held the greatest power in the empire that had no duke, the imperial authority would be strengthened, and no one would be able to easily spread rumors about Celine. Of course, Celine had self-interest as well. To Corinne, a teacher who only had one class a week that was not suited for her. She needed to play in a little bigger board. Corinne had the kindness that could correct a perverse child like Celine. Chapter 287. The most appropriate place was to go to the School of Commoners founded by Celine, as a principal. Although it was a commoners' school, it was founded by the Crown Princess. No one could easily regard her, so all that was left was Corinne's permission. But I have to look at the work of the Marquis family, so I'm not sure if I can make it. You don't have to worry about it. It's enough to get a report and look around the kids. Rather, you'll have more time than you have now. Of course, if Corinne really became the principal, she would be too busy not to be compared to a teacher at the academy, but Celine convinced her that she would never be. And Corinne's about to have a baby, right? I'm sure Corinne's kid would be proud to know that you are a principal who takes care of so many children. Corinne is going to have a baby sooner or later. No, it is a little later than expected. It's clear that not only Corinne's child but also all the children in the capital will follow you like a mother. Corinne is the only one who can make them happy. Finally, as Celine touched the heart of Corinne who loves a child, her lips hardened. She looked determined. Since it was also the best job for a woman to climb to the top, she would be greedy. What was more, she had dreamed of being a teacher since she was a child. I get it. But I need my husband's consent. I'll tell him because I'll have to vacate the house often. Sure. Go ahead. I'm sure the Marquis of Vincent would be happy to accept it. As Celine said, the Marquis of Vincent didn't refuse Corinne's request, and it didn't take much time before it became known that the headmaster of the school the Crown Princess had founded for the common people was the Marquis of Vincent. Your Highness the Crown Princess. Your Highness the Crown Princess. Look at the newspaper I brought. Now that it was time to stop her frivolous behavior, Annie, who appeared, panting with a quick step, handed Celine a newspaper. It was a newspaper that the common people read. In the past, she had seen it often to predict the future, but since Hans had entered the academy, she hadn't looked at it any further because there was no need to predict the future anymore. What kind of news is there that you forget the aristocratic play and behave in an undignified manner? As Celine accepted the newspaper, Ruby, who was waiting nearby, furrowed her forehead. The most respected figure for the common people is not the emperor, but the crown princess. When she saw Celine read an article that decorated the center of the newspaper, Annie said with a rising smile, "It is natural, but no matter where I go these days, there's nothing but a story about your Highness the Crown Princess. All of the people are praising you for doing a good deed, and they are sure you are an angel from heaven." Annie kept on saying that the support for Celine was almost beyond the emperor. She said something quite natural, though everyone knew it, even if she didn't have to show it through the newspaper. "I don't think this is why you, a bride-to-be who should be busy preparing for the wedding, delay your schedule because of the hustle and bustle." Celine had even given Annie a vacation because she had looked very busy. So when Celine pointed this out sharply, Annie closed her mouth and rolled her eyes. She looked embarrassed because she was caught off guard, but she soon blushed and looked at Celine's eyes because it had been a frequent occurrence. "Actually, I came to see you so shamelessly for a favor." "What do you want?" There was nothing new, but Celine asked back, putting the newspaper down on the table. It was expected. There was so much she needed for a wedding that she would need help with it. "I've been wondering if you could introduce to me the designer you invested in last time. I've personally checked other designers, but it's more expensive than I thought, and I don't like their styles." Before the words were finished, Ruby opened her eyes wide, and Celine's mouth went up. "Ruby, show Annie what I've prepared." Yes. What you've prepared for." Annie, who had a puzzled look, quickly followed Ruby's hand gesture as to asking what she did instead of following her. "I think Her Highness the Crown Princess knows you really well. That's why she's prepared it in advance." "What do you mean?" Annie was going to ask Ruby, but she couldn't talk because she reached her destination. "No." Ruby opened the door and Annie could not keep on saying at the landscape that had unfolded. "Oh, my God. What's all this?" "That's what Her Highness the Crown Princess has prepared for you too." Amazingly, Celine had ordered a dress from the designer in advance, judging that Annie would make such a request. Annie, with her mouth wide open, looking at the room packed with dozens of dresses, slowly entered the room. They were all too colorful and beautiful compared to the dresses Annie had separately checked. "Celine has prepared all of these dresses." She was so moved that she could not speak. "These are the dresses she ordered for you and Jessica to wear. If you choose a dress you like, the designer will adjust it to your size. She said you could take several dresses." "You are so blessed even if you are just a maid," Ruby said quietly to herself. "You are right. I am so blessed even if I am just a maid." I was very good at choosing Celine after abandoning Lyra, Annie thought so 1,000 times. Her Highness knew you'd come to ask her and prepared them a few days ago. However, I've never thought you'd come to ask her. How dare you? You are just a maid and a commoner. You don't recognize who you are, Ruby complained several more times and quietly asked Annie, who was watching the dresses without caring what she said next to her. "Is Her Highness the Crown Princess often give gifts to maids?" "Of course." "Do you ask for it while seeing what she's prepared?" "I don't even ask her if she's not this kind of person in the first place. I have a sense of shame." "I thought you were shameless." Ruby's expression was changed at Annie's reaction that it was not worth talking about. It was because she was also an opportunist like Annie. Celine's devotion to the maids was too much to be seen or heard. Really? What kind of maid does Her Highness the Crown Princess like? Ruby's pride was hurt, but when she asked Annie how she would satisfy Celine's mind, Annie answered frankly because there was nothing to hide. "A maid who does her orders well." Ruby furrowed her forehead at such a simple and clear answer. "That's it? Then what more could there be?" You'll know once you do it. It doesn't seem like you're doing a good job with her orders. How many times have you made mistakes when she assigned you to a reception job? When Ruby pointed this out, Annie pouted her mouth for a while and said that there was one thing she had missed. Her Highness the Crown Princess likes a maid who is good at what no one else would do. What is it that no one would do? Well, it's hard to give an example. Well, you'll find out when you get a chance, or maybe you'll never know. Annie hummed and watched the dresses after leaving a meaningful comment. If she liked any dress, she called Ruby and told her to put it aside. I'm not your maid. I am not, right? Ruby, who was about to get angry, closed her mouth, recalling the advice she just heard from Annie. She thought this would be something no one would do. I get it. Ruby, imagining the sweet price Celine would give, nodded silently. It was enough to make her take care of a humble maid from the common people. Annie chose several dresses, and Ruby quietly followed her. It was their marriage that remained because Celine had had a national marriage and adapted to the life of the imperial castle, and the future of Annie and Jessica had been guaranteed. They had deliberately delayed their marriage for Celine, and they took the wedding day as something really important to them. It was Jessica who had a wedding first among them. Chapter 288. Annie was supposed to hold the ceremony first, but when Celine's support, including the dress, began, she prepared a new ceremony, canceling everything she had decided and prepared. In contrast, Jessie only received Celine's necessary support and used what she had prepared as scheduled. In the first place, she was burdened with too much and tried to refuse it, but she was forced by Celine to accept it. How can this be a commoner's wedding? Only the rich nobilities can afford this. Despite Jessica's refusal, Celine decorated the wedding hall more beautifully and visitors were astonished. Her Highness the Crown Princess is behind her. Jessica is not an ordinary commoner. That's what I think. Besides, it's only a matter of time before she gets the title because her husband's abilities are outstanding, and he's in the right position. Although the precedent is rare, it is possible. His Highness the Crown Prince is very much in love with Her Highness the Crown Princess, so he will listen to anything she wants. I'm sure His Highness will be an emperor soon, so it may be simple. She would be the luckiest woman in the empire. Isn't she now? Those who talked about Jessica and her husband were nobles who were not very close to her. They seemed to have attended the event to get a good impression from Celine if she would attend. In addition, they believed that Jessica, a favorite maid of Celine, would soon rise to her status, so they even gave a warm greeting to Jessica's relatives. Oh, my God! Her Highness the Crown Princess has really come here. And just before the ceremony began, as expected by the audience, Celine appeared with Asher. Though Jessica was the most beloved maid, Celine was expected to come alone because she was a commoner, but Celine appeared with Asher and everyone was once again convinced that Jessica and Hans would rise in status. Celine, who had not exchanged greetings with anyone, immediately visited the waiting room where Jessica was waiting and greeted her. Oh, you don't have to come. How can I miss your wedding? You kept saying the right thing to me, the wicked woman. Although she had had a miserable end for not following her words, it had rather hardened her trust in Jessica through them. As he also knew it, Asher was willing to follow Celine to show his face to the wedding momentarily. You will have a long vacation, so you can have a good and relaxed time with your husband. When you get back, you'll have to suffer from a heavy duty again. Thank you. Even though she said so, the edges of Jessica's eyelids were red because she knew that having a job to return to was a blessing by Celine's favor. What kind of maid could go on vacation just because she was married? It was a job that they had to take a wedding ceremony on a holiday that came once a week. There were a lot of people who couldn't even do it. No, there were a lot of maids who could not get married. It was a job if they got married and couldn't take care of their family. With marriage, more people chose to retire because they couldn't go back. Well, I've seen your face, so I'll go back now. I can't stay long because I've split the time I don't have. No, thank you. It's more than enough that you came. It was already an honor that Celine showed her face even though she didn't stay until the end of the wedding. As a result, Celine looked slowly at Jessica's unflattering appearance and turned her steps without hesitation. I feel weird. At Celine's words, which she uttered on her way to the carriage, Asher cheered her up, giving a little strength on the hand he held. You've seen the maid for a long time, so you deserve it. Did you also feel this way when your close associate got married? Are you talking about me? However, he could not easily answer the question that Celine asked him. He never seemed to feel that way. As he comforted her, he could say, yes, or, you'll get better after a little while. It was at a time when she tried to regain her original condition, taking off her strange feelings, seeing that he was speechless and was worried about what to say. Somehow the hall was crowded and bustling. There were so many people who were so huddled that they did not notice the passing of the crown princess and the crown princess. Their eyes were mingled with envy, jealousy, and displeasure. Annie gave her a secret look so that they couldn't notice it. What's the matter? Why are they looking so impure at Jessica's wedding, which deserves only a blessing? To confirm this, Celine turned her eyes, and unexpectedly, there was Baron Berboom and Annie. She was wearing one of the dresses she had received from Celine, surpassing the nobility and second only to the bride. As such, she seemed to have drawn the attention to herself even though she did not take any noticeable action, and it seemed to have offended the nobles. I thought they stopped being offended by Annie and Jessica. Although Annie is a commoner, she is in such a position that they can't swear openly and talk behind her back. No, they are not far from Annie's back. Isn't this far enough for even me to notice? It was tantamount to a rebuke that barely covered Annie's eyes. There was no need to win love and respect from all, but it was unpleasant to be scolded as if it were not in such a short distance. In addition, it reminded Celine of nobles who had used to laugh at herself in the past. Because of that, Celine's expression changed after watching the scene for a while. It was similar to her face in the past when she had just gotten the hourglass in her hand and plotted how to get revenge on Lyra. She also looked as if she still had a long way to go. I was about to go back to the Imperial Castle right away. But I think I should stop by the hall for a while. After watching the mood of the hall and the changes in Celine, Asher nodded as if he had no choice. As he had already said, it doesn't matter what your attitude is, he seemed to have no intention of stopping her. Celine's step toward the inside of the hall was light. The nobles, who had so far secretly blamed Annie, began to politely salute her in her imposing and elegant appearance, as if they had never done so, wondering how they could be seen better. Yes, that's where you're supposed to be, where you're sitting. But she didn't think they would do that, so she had to tame them, not to repeat the past again. Annie. Celine called Annie's name. Annie, who had not noticed her approach, smiled to the fullest and took a courtesy. She was like her stupid self in the past. No matter how much you like Baron Berboom, shouldn't you at least say hello to the nobles who are paying attention to you? Sooner or later, you will become a member of the aristocratic society. The faces of the nobles began to turn pale when she gave out the nuance that she had been watching them all. If you are all scared now, then you shouldn't have been offended in the first place. Celine smiled, checking the faces of the nobles one by one. It was also a confirmation process to check everyone's faces. Celine, who checked their increasingly frightened expressions, checked Annie's face and slowly opened her mouth. It was time for her to let them know who they were. The end.